Welcome, my brave listener, to a journey above the clouds, where shadows never fade, and the echoes of the dead still cling to the stone. Tonight, we're re-venturing beyond the safe paths and tourist trails deep into the haunted peaks of America. From cursed mining ridges to ancient burial summits, each mountain hides a story the wind still whispers. If you dare to listen, so wrap yourself in a blanket, dim the lights, and let's climb together into the mist. Because these are the 25 most haunted mountains in the United States, where spirits still wander. Mount Hood rises from Oregon's landscape like a sleeping giant, its snow-capped peak glowing pale beneath the moon. From a distance, it looks serene, timeless, even divine. But those who have felt the mountain's breath up close know the truth. Beauty here hides danger, and silence is never truly empty. For over a century, climbers have been drawn to Mount Hood's frozen slopes. They arrive with ropes, maps, and dreams of touching the summit. Some return with photographs and pride. Others simply never return at all. Since the early 1900s, hundreds have vanished without a trace. Their names added to lists that stretched longer than any trail. The mountain takes without warning, a clear sky one moment, a whiteout storm the next. Search parties find discarded gloves, broken compasses, and half-buried footprints that end abruptly at sheer cliffs. The rest is swallowed by the snow. Locals speak of nights when the wind carries voices. They say if you listen from Timberline Lodge, you can hear faint cries drifting down the slopes, climbers calling for help, lost forever between this world and whatever waits inside the ice. Some visitors dismiss it as imagination, but seasoned rangers know better. They've walked those trails alone at dusk and felt the cold rise suddenly, as if something unseen had exhaled nearby. One ranger, a veteran of 20 winters, once confessed he saw a figure moving just beyond the tree line. It was dressed like an old-style mountaineer. Wool coat, rope slung over one shoulder. When he called out, the man stopped and turned slightly, revealing a face as pale as snow. Then he stepped forward and disappeared. The next morning, the ranger found no prints where the stranger had stood, though the powder was fresh from the night storm. He never hiked that ridge again. Deep beneath Mount Hood lie forgotten tunnels, remnants of early mining expeditions and wartime shelters. Most are sealed now, but some still breathe faint drafts of air that carry the scent of earth and decay. Explorers who have ventured inside speak of strange sounds, dripping water that changes rhythm, rocks shifting when no one moves, whispers too soft to locate. Their flashlights flicker as though the darkness itself feeds on light. Inside those tunnels, even in midsummer, the temperature plummets to freezing. It's said the mountain's heart beats there, cold and slow, guarding what should never be found. Old stories tell of the frozen guardian, a spirit that protects the peak from trespassers. The legend began with the native tribes who once lived near the base. They respected the mountain as sacred ground, a dwelling of spirits, not a playground for man. Hunters who strayed too far toward the glaciers sometimes returned days later, unable to speak of what they'd seen, their eyes glazed with frost. Others didn't return at all. To this day, some elders refuse to point directly at Mount Hood, fearing it stirs the guardian's attention. Climbers laugh at such tales until the mountain reminds them who's in charge. There are modern accounts, experienced hikers caught in sudden storms where their GPS devices go haywire. Radios crackle with static, compasses spin, and visibility drops to nothing. A few survivors describe feeling watched, followed, even guided down the wrong path by a shadow that moved deliberately ahead of them. One man claimed he saw his own reflection walking toward him in the mist before blacking out. He was later found miles off route, frostbitten, and delirious, mumbling, "It wanted me to stay." The mountain's jealousy, as locals call it, shows itself in small ways too. Cameras refuse to focus near certain cliffs. Drones lose signal and crash without explanation. Dogs refuse to enter specific areas, growling at invisible shapes. And sometimes, the snow reveals faint outlines, as if dozens of people had once stood in a circle, their imprints slowly filling with ice. Scientists blame shifting weather patterns, magnetic anomalies, and human error. But those who live in Mount Hood's shadow know better. They've seen how the fog forms, shapes, how the wind whispers names. They've watched candles flicker inside cabins when no draft exists. They've woken to find frost blooming across windows from the inside out, tracing patterns that look disturbingly like hands. Every few years, when rescue teams search for another lost climber, they hear the same thing over the radios: faint breathing on empty channels, soft words drowned by static. "Help me," someone whispers. Teams rush to triangulate the signal, but it always fades, leading them deeper into blizzards that feel unnatural, almost purposeful. Sometimes, the searchers themselves need rescuing. Locals say the mountain remembers everyone it has taken. Their spirits linger, merging with the snow and wind, forever calling out for warmth they'll never feel again. On rare nights, when the moonlight cuts across the peak, some claim to see faint silhouettes moving along the ridges. Slow, steady, eternal. These aren't ghosts in the usual sense. They are echoes of ambition, pride, and fear, preserved in ice. And yet, despite the warnings, people keep coming. They come for the challenge, for glory, for the view from the top. They underestimate the silence. But silence here is alive. It listens. It waits. The moment you think you've conquered Mount Hood is the moment it decides whether to let you leave. Those who've reached the summit and returned speak with reverence. Many say they felt something there, not evil exactly, but immense. A consciousness older than the forests below, aware of every heartbeat trespassing on its frozen skin. Some wept without knowing why. Others dropped their gear and fled, terrified by a sensation they couldn't name. When storms roll in from the Pacific and swallow the mountain whole, locals say it's the guardian stretching in its sleep, shaking snow from its shoulders. That's when they lock their doors, light their fires, and listen carefully. Sometimes the wind sounds like laughter. Other times, it's crying. Mount Hood isn't just a peak, it's a keeper of secrets. It doesn't forgive arrogance, and it never forgets the names of those who climb too high. So if you ever find yourself staring up at that flawless white crown under a silver sky, remember, beauty can be cruel, and even the calmest mountain has a heartbeat. Mount Washington stands tall in the heart of New Hampshire's White Mountains. Beautiful but merciless, its peak often shrouded in thick clouds. It's known across the world for something chilling: the strongest winds ever recorded on Earth. In 1934, the mountain's observatory captured gusts roaring at 184 miles per hour, strong enough to tear the roofs from buildings and send stones rolling like marbles. But beyond the science and the numbers lies a darker truth. The wind here doesn't only howl, it whispers. Since the 1800s, countless travelers and climbers have met their end on Mount Washington. The weather turns without warning. What begins as a sunny hike can become a blizzard within minutes. Temperatures drop from warmth to deadly cold, and the wind, sharp as glass, slices through even the thickest gear. Those who die up there aren't always found, and those who are often seen frozen in poses of desperation, hands reaching forward, as if trying to grasp something invisible just before the storm took them. Locals say that not all who perish on Mount Washington truly leave it. Hikers speak of voices carried by the wind, cries, screams, and sometimes laughter. On moonlit nights, when the fog rolls down like a curtain, some claim to see shapes moving within it. Shadowy figures trudge through the snow, heads bowed, their forms flickering like candle flames. When called out to, they vanish instantly, leaving nothing but silence and swirling powder. The mountain's observatory staff are used to the isolation, but even they admit that some nights are different. The wind takes on a tone almost human, moaning as it wraps around the towers. Instruments rattle without reason, doors creak open, though locked tight, and radios crackle with static that sometimes carries faint words. One worker swore he heard someone whisper, "Please help me," through his headset, but no one was transmitting. Rescue teams have their own stories. One man, seasoned and skeptical, was searching for a missing hiker during a brutal snowstorm. Through the whiteout, he spotted a figure waving from a distant ridge, frantic, desperate, fighting the wind. He trudged toward it, calling out that help was on the way. But when he arrived, the ridge was empty. No footprints led away, and the snow was untouched. Only the sound of the wind answered him, a low, sorrowful wail that grew into something like laughter. He left the mountain the next day and never returned. Another ranger once described feeling a sudden, overwhelming sadness as he passed through a narrow pass near Tuckerman Ravine. The air grew still for just a second, unnaturally calm, before a gust nearly knocked him off his feet. In that moment, he said, he heard dozens of voices crying out at once, then silence. When he regained his footing, the wind returned to normal, but the temperature had dropped 10 degrees. It's like the mountain breathes, he said later. And sometimes, it sighs. Local folklore says Mount Washington isn't merely dangerous because of the weather. It's cursed by the spirits of those who underestimated it. They say the mountain hungers for respect, punishing arrogance with sudden storms. Climbers who brag or laugh at its warnings often encounter the worst luck. Equipment breaks, maps vanish in gusts, and compasses spin without direction. One old guide once said, "You don't climb Mount Washington. It lets you." Some visitors who stay overnight at the observatory report strange dreams. They dream of walking alone through endless fog, hearing footsteps behind them that match their pace. When they turn, no one's there. Others wake to find frost forming on the inside of their windows in the shape of hands, as if something cold outside is reaching in. The staff tries to explain it scientifically. Condensation, pressure changes, nothing supernatural. But they don't deny that sometimes the patterns look too deliberate to be random. Then there's the story of the Phantom Trail. In 1978, 2 hikers disappeared during a blizzard. Weeks later, another group reported seeing 2 men ahead of them on a section of the mountain that wasn't part of any marked route. They followed, calling out to warn them that they were off course. But the men never looked back. They simply walked on, fading into the snow. When rescuers investigated, they found no tracks. The path those figures had taken didn't exist on any map. And when the snow melted in spring, there was nothing there but bare rock. Those who live in the nearby town of North Conway often hear the wind howling from the peaks late at night. To them, it doesn't sound random. It rises and falls like voices in argument, sometimes soft, sometimes screaming. A few believe the wind carries the memories of every soul lost up there, trapped forever in the endless storm. Some even perform quiet blessings at the base before hiking, whispering apologies before setting foot on the trail. Despite its deadly reputation, people keep returning. The lure of the challenge is irresistible. To stand where the air itself seems alive, to conquer the place that has claimed so many. But Mount Washington doesn't forget. It's a place where arrogance meets nature's wrath, where even the prepared can become victims of forces beyond comprehension. And sometimes, it feels as if the mountain itself watches, waiting for the next soul, brave or foolish, enough to climb. Those who survive often speak of the moment they felt it watching them. They say it's not the fear of falling or freezing that chills them. It's the sense that the wind itself is aware. One climber described feeling a presence circling him during a storm, like invisible hands pushing against his back. When he turned around, the snow was swirling in a spiral, forming a shape almost human before scattering apart. To this day, the locals call Mount Washington the home of the deadly winds. It's a name earned through tragedy and whispered with respect. The storms still come without warning, and the voices still ride the gales. On calm days, when the summit glows beneath a rare blue sky, you might almost believe the stories are just myths. But when night falls and the air begins to howl, the mountain remembers. Brown Mountain, North Carolina, a place of quiet beauty by day. But once the sun dips behind the Blue Ridge, the world changes. The air thickens, the forest stills, and strange orbs of light rise from the darkness like restless souls returning home. For over a century, these glowing spheres have haunted the mountain slopes, sometimes a pale white, other times an icy blue, moving with an eerie grace that defies explanation. They float in silence, pulsing softly, before fading into the blackness as if swallowed by the earth itself. The first documented sighting dates back to the early 1900s, when railroad workers reported seeing lights hovering over the ridge after dusk. But the Cherokee people tell a much older story, one of grief and endless searching. According to their legend, the lights are the spirits of women who lost their warriors in battle. Heartbroken and unable to accept death, their souls wander the mountain each night, carrying ghostly lanterns in their desperate search for loved ones who never returned. Generations later, the mystery endures. Scientists have offered explanations: swamp gas, reflections of car headlights, even mirages caused by atmospheric distortions, but none have ever captured the full truth. The lights appear where there are no roads, no swamps, and no easy answers. Rangers have camped for nights hoping to record them, only to witness them drifting silently through the trees, never behaving like any man-made phenomena. Locals who've lived near Brown Mountain for decades speak of the lights with reverent fear. They don't try to chase them. They know better. The warnings are simple and always the same: never follow the lights. Because those who do often vanish, leaving behind nothing but dropped cameras, drained batteries, and footprints that stop mid. One story tells of a pair of hikers who ventured out after dark, determined to find the source. They followed the orbs deep into the forest as they glided between the trees, beckoning like the wisps. Hours later, rescuers found them at dawn, their flashlights dead, their eyes wide open, staring blankly at the sky. They were alive, but they couldn't speak for days. When they finally did, they whispered about a light that split in two and circled them, humming softly before vanishing. The sound, they said, wasn't of this world. Even modern equipment fails near Brown Mountain. Cameras freeze, drones lose signal, and GPS trackers spin endlessly. One paranormal team recorded an electromagnetic spike moments before a glowing orb drifted past their camp, hovering motionless before shooting straight into the clouds. The air turned cold enough to see their breath, though it was midsummer. There's an observation point along Highway 181 where visitors gather to watch the phenomenon safely from a distance. Some nights, nothing happens, just a wind rustling through the trees and the hum of insects. But other nights, when the sky is clear and the moonlight is thin, the lights appear soft at first, then brighter, rising from the valley floor like spirits waking from their graves. They flicker just beyond reach, as if aware of being watched. Local folklore says the mountain is cursed, that it holds the souls of those who died in storms or wars long forgotten. Some even believe the lights mark the path to another realm, a thin place where the veil between the living and the dead wears dangerously thin. Hunters claim that when the lights appear, the forest goes silent. No birds, no crickets, only the faint hum of energy and the feeling that you're not alone. There's an unease that settles on anyone who stays too long, a sense of being observed. One woman who grew up nearby said she used to watch the lights from her porch as a child, but one night she saw a figure standing beneath them, motionless, head tilted upward. When she blinked, both the figure and the lights were gone. The next morning, she found small footprints leading into the woods, but never coming back out. Brown Mountain holds its secrets tightly. Whether they're restless spirits, natural wonders, or something in between, no one truly knows. But everyone agrees on one thing: once you've seen the lights, you never forget them. They linger in your mind like an unfinished song, haunting you long after you've left the mountain. Those who visit often describe a strange pull, a magnetic curiosity that draws them back, as if the mountain itself remembers their presence. Maybe that's what the lights are. Memories made visible, 1,000 untold stories flickering across the night sky, searching endlessly for peace. Pikes Peak rises above Colorado like a sleeping giant, its snow-capped crown gleaming under the sun. Tourists see beauty, adventure, and breathtaking views from its 14,115-foot summit. But long before railways and gift shops carved their way to the top, this mountain was feared as much as it was revered. To the Native American tribes who first lived in its shadow, Pikes Peak was a sacred realm, a place of spirits, where the earth itself could listen, remember, and strike back. They spoke of angry guardians who dwelt among the rocks and clouds, mountain spirits who punished those who disrespected the land. Offerings of herbs and stones were once left at the base before anyone dared to climb. Elders warned that those who ignored these rituals might never return. The winds, they said, could carry a man away without a trace, claimed by the restless souls who guarded the mountain. When the gold rush swept through Colorado in the mid-1800s, that reverence was quickly replaced by greed. Prospectors arrived by the hundreds, digging into the slopes and blasting apart caves, once considered sacred burial grounds. The warnings of the tribes were dismissed as superstition. But soon, strange things began to happen. Miners vanished. Entire camps were found abandoned. Tents still standing. Food left half-eaten. Tools scattered as if their owners had simply walked into the mist and never come back. In some cases, the miners' tools were discovered again, cleaned, polished, and arranged neatly beside untouched gold veins. The gold itself was never taken, as though the spirits were guarding it from the living. Local papers, at the time, dismissed these tales as rumors meant to scare away competition. But the locals knew better. The disappearances continued, and whispers grew louder about the curse of Pikes Peak. Even those who survived told chilling stories. One prospector described hearing the rhythmic sound of a pickaxe in the distance, echoing through a canyon long after the other miners had gone to sleep. When he followed the sound, he saw a dim lantern light moving across the rocks. He called out, no answer. As he drew closer, the light flickered and faded, leaving only silence. He found no footprints, no campfire, no sign of life. The next morning, his tent had been torn open, and his tools were gone. Hikers still report similar encounters today. On foggy mornings, when the summit is hidden by clouds, some claim to see faint, shadowy figures moving across the cliffs. Men in old mining clothes, their faces pale and indistinct. Their lanterns glow dimly, a ghostly amber light that sways gently before vanishing into the mist. Park rangers have received countless reports of strange lights on the upper trails, always in places too remote for other hikers to reach. Even the mountain itself seems alive with memory. The air grows unnaturally still in certain areas, as if the world is holding its breath. Birds stop singing, and the wind falls silent. That's when some hear it, the sharp, metallic sound of a pickaxe striking stone. 1, 2, 3, then nothing. It echoes faintly, as though coming from deep within the mountain. And when people search for the source, they find nothing but rocks and silence. There is an old story told among park workers about a man who went missing near the summit in the 1930s. He was an amateur historian, fascinated by gold rush legends, determined to find proof of the lost mining camps. He was last seen heading toward an unmarked trail at sunset. A week later, his pack and camera were found neatly placed beside a cluster of rocks, untouched, perfectly arranged. His body was never recovered. On the last photo in his camera roll, there was a faint figure standing in the mist, holding what looked like a lantern. Modern visitors who ride the cog railway or drive up the scenic highway rarely sense the darker history beneath their feet. But locals still speak of the summit whispers. When the wind howls across the peak at night, some say you can hear voices carried in the storm, murmurs of men calling out for help, forever lost in the blinding snow. Experienced climbers have reported feeling sudden bursts of cold air, even on warm days, followed by the distinct smell of burning oil, the kind once used in miners' lamps. On rare occasions, tourists claim to hear the clink of metal echoing across the ridges, faint but steady, as if invisible hands were still toiling beneath the earth. Some even say the ghosts are protective, watching over those who respect the mountain and warning away those who don't. One woman who ignored park warnings and wandered off-trail near dusk later described seeing a lantern swinging in the fog, leading her back to safety. When she turned to thank whoever had helped her, there was no one there, only the soft crunch of footsteps fading into the snow. As night falls over Pikes Peak, mist gathers like smoke around its slopes. The mountain becomes eerily quiet, save for the occasional whisper of wind sweeping over the summit. Locals who live in nearby towns say that when the spirits of the miners begin their eternal work, their lanterns flicker between the rocks, moving in patterns that no human could follow. The faint sound of pickaxes striking stone drifts through the valleys. sometimes lasting for hours before fading into silence. Whether you believe the stories or not, one truth remains. Pikes Peak holds its ghosts close. It remembers every miner who defied it, every spirit buried beneath its snow, every echo of greed that disturbed its peace. The mountain stands as both monument and warning, beautiful, dangerous, and eternal. Mount Shasta rises like a colossal guardian of the Northern California skyline, majestic, snow-capped, and utterly mysterious. To most visitors, it's a paradise for hikers and dreamers, a place of stunning beauty where clouds seem to cling lovingly to its peak. But for those who've lived in its shadow, Mount Shasta is far more than just a mountain. It's alive, it hums with energy, whispers with voices from other worlds, and hides secrets that defy reason. For centuries, Native American tribes believed Shasta was a sacred place, a bridge between the physical and spiritual realms. They spoke of gods who descended from the heavens onto its slopes, of glowing lights moving through the fog, and of ancient cities hidden beneath the ice. Modern mystics have taken those legends further, claiming that inside Mount Shasta lies an entrance to another world, a vast subterranean city known as Telos, home to beings of light who watch over humanity from the shadows. Hikers tell stories of strange electromagnetic surges, compasses spinning wildly, and voices echoing through the mist when no one else is around. But of all the tales that swirl around this mountain of myths, none is more unsettling than that of the White Lady of Shasta. The ghost said to haunt the forest at twilight, forever searching, forever lost. The legend began in the late 1800s, when settlers claimed to have seen a pale figure wandering the lower slopes. She was always described the same way, tall and slender, wearing a tattered white dress that fluttered without wind, her face hidden beneath a hood. Those who saw her said the air grew suddenly heavy, and an unnatural silence fell over the forest. Birds stopped singing. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then came the dizziness, a strange, disorienting pool, as if the earth itself were shifting beneath their feet. Some who encountered her claimed she spoke in a whisper, her voice barely audible, yet echoing inside their minds. She would ask for help, always the same plea, to follow her, to find something she had lost. But those who obeyed never returned. Only their belongings were found later, scattered near ravines or deep among the trees, as if they'd walked willingly into the wilderness and vanished. A park ranger in the 1960s described an experience that still chills locals today. He had been searching for a lost hiker near Panther Meadow when twilight began to fall. That's when he saw her, a woman standing perfectly still in the fading light, her white dress glowing faintly against the darkening trees. She didn't move, didn't speak, but he felt her eyes on him, even though he couldn't see her face beneath the hood. He called out, no answer. The next moment, the forest began to spin. His vision blurred, and he stumbled backward, collapsing to the ground. When he woke, it was dark, and she was gone. His watch had stopped, and his radio refused to work for hours afterward. Others have described similar encounters, flashes of white between the trees, the rustle of footsteps that never draw closer, and the faint scent of flowers that shouldn't exist at that altitude. One man hiking near Castle Lake claimed he followed a woman's singing voice through the fog until he found himself standing at the edge of a cliff. He swore something unseen had drawn him there, a trance so deep that when he broke free, he fell to his knees in shock. He never hiked alone again. Some believe the White Lady was once a settler's wife who lost her husband to the mountain's harsh storms and died searching for him. Others think she is something much older, a guardian spirit of the mountain, punishing those who trespass without respect. But among those who study the supernatural, there's a darker theory, that she is not a ghost at all, but a manifestation of the mountain's energy, a lure, a projection sent to protect the secrets hidden within. Mount Shasta has long been called a portal, a place where dimensions overlap and time seems to bend. Pilots have reported seeing glowing domes near the summit, while campers tell of blue lights hovering in the night sky. Devices fail. Batteries drain. Some say they've lost hours on the trails, awakening miles from where they began, unable to explain how they got there. The mountain, it seems, does not play by human rules. Those who've encountered the White Lady describe one unifying detail, her eyes. They say if you look into them, you'll forget everything, your name, your past, even your purpose for climbing the mountain. It's as if she wipes away your identity, leaving only confusion and fear. One survivor, an experienced hiker, told a chilling story after being found wandering near the base. He couldn't remember his own name for 2 days. The only words he spoke were, "She wanted me to follow." Locals know better than to go looking for her. They tell newcomers, never hike after twilight, never wander off the path, and never look into her eyes. Those who ignore the warnings sometimes come back changed, quiet, distant, their memories fragmented like broken glass. Some never come back at all. Even scientists who dismiss the paranormal admit Mount Shasta is a geological enigma. Its magnetic fields are unusually strong, its weather unpredictable. But for the people who live nearby, those explanations don't erase the strange truths they've witnessed. The lights, the whispers, the woman in white, they're all part of the same mystery. 1. The mountain guards fiercely. On clear nights, when the moonlight touches its snowy peak, some say you can see a faint shimmer near the summit, like a doorway opening for just a moment. And if you listen closely, beneath the wind, you might hear a soft voice calling your name, gentle, sorrowful, and utterly irresistible. That's when you must turn back. Because those who follow the voice never return the same. Mount Rainier looms over Washington like a sleeping god, majestic, snow-capped, and untamed. Rising more than 14,000 feet into the clouds, it's one of the most breathtaking and dangerous mountains in America. Every year, climbers come from around the world to conquer its icy slopes. Yet, for all its beauty, Rainier demands respect. The weather can turn deadly in minutes, and even the most experienced mountaineers have vanished into its storms. But some say not everyone who perished there truly left. Some souls, it seems, are still climbing. High on the mountain sits Camp Muir, a base camp named after the naturalist John Muir. It's a rugged outpost perched on a ridge above the clouds where climbers rest before making their final push to the summit. The camp is usually a place of exhaustion and anticipation, crampons clinking, wind howling, tents rustling in the night. But for decades, visitors have whispered of something else up there, something that weeps when the mountain sleeps. Those who've spent the night at Camp Muir speak of hearing it, a faint, sorrowful sound carried by the wind. At first, it seems like the moan of shifting ice or the whine of the storm. But then it becomes clearer, unmistakable, the sound of a woman crying. The sobbing drifts between the tents, rising and falling with the gusts, sometimes close enough to make the hairs on your neck stand up. Climbers step out with flashlights, calling out, thinking someone's in trouble. But there's never anyone there. The legend says she was once a bride-to-be, young and full of life, who came to Rainier decades ago with her fiancé. They planned one last adventure before their wedding, a climb to the summit. The weather was clear when they began, but on the second day, the mountain changed. A sudden blizzard swept in, blinding and merciless. The man was found days later, frostbitten and delirious, muttering her name. His bride, however, was never found. Only a scrap of white lace, caught on an ice axe near Camp Muir, remained. Since then, her ghost is said to wander the mountain, especially when the snow falls heavy and the wind screams through the ridges. Climbers call her the crying ghost of Camp Muir. Some describe her as a pale figure drifting between the tents, her veil whipping like smoke in the storm. Others have seen her from a distance, a woman in a tattered white dress, stumbling through the blizzard, her hands reaching out for someone she never find. During a late-night storm, his team picked up a faint distress call, a woman's voice crying for help over the radio. The signal was weak, but they could make out her words, "Please, I'm cold." They searched for hours, following her voice through howling wind and whiteout snow. Each time they thought they were close, the voice would shift, echoing from another direction. When the storm finally cleared, they found no footprints, no lost climber, just silence. The call, they later confirmed, hadn't come from any registered frequency. Others have had stranger encounters still. A mountaineer once claimed he woke to find a shadow standing at the edge of his tent. Through the thin fabric, he saw the outline of a woman, slender, motionless. Thinking she was lost, He unzipped the flap, only to find nothing but swirling snow. His tent, however, bore streaks of water across the inside wall, as if someone had been crying beside him. Rangers don't speak much about the ghost, but they admit the mountain has its moods. Radios sometimes pick up static that sounds eerily like weeping. Equipment malfunctions for no reason, and occasionally, during rescue missions, the voice of a woman can be heard faintly over the wind, calling out the same name again and again. Those who've heard it say it doesn't sound like a warning, it sounds like heartbreak. Some climbers believe she's searching for her fiancé, forever trapped between the living and the dead. Others think she is a manifestation of the mountain's sorrow, the embodiment of all the lives Rainier has claimed. The mountain is known for sudden storms that swallow climbers whole, leaving their fates uncertain for months, sometimes years. Perhaps her spirit mourns not just her own loss, but theirs too. Visitors who stay at Camp Muir often speak of uneasy dreams. They dream of walking through endless white snow, hearing footsteps behind them, turning around to see a figure in a veil just beyond reach. When they wake, the air inside the tent feels colder than it should. One man described feeling a hand brush his shoulder as he packed his gear at dawn. Another heard a woman's whisper say, "Don't leave me," before his tent collapsed under calm skies. Even those who can't believe in ghosts can't deny the mountain's eerie power. On clear nights, when the moonlight strikes the snow just right, the summit seems to glow, beautiful but otherworldly. And sometimes, faint tracks appear leading away from camp, ending abruptly at the edge of a crevasse. Some think they belong to wildlife, others to climbers who went off course, but a few whisper they're hers, the footsteps of a lost bride, forever wandering, forever calling. When storms roll in and Camp Muir disappears beneath a shroud of white, the mountain feels haunted in more ways than one. The wind howls like a woman's cry, echoing through the canyons. Lanterns flicker in empty tents. The living huddle together for warmth, while somewhere out there, in the cold beyond, a lonely spirit still searches for the one she loved. Mount Rainier keeps her close, guarding her story in snow and silence. And on nights, when the blizzard is at its fiercest, climbers swear they can see her, a flicker of white against the storm, a bride frozen in time. She weeps not for herself, but for all who dared to climb and never came back down. The crying ghost of Camp Muir, forever reaching, forever calling, forever lost in the mountain's endless storm. Mount Greylock rises as the tallest point in Massachusetts, a rugged sentinel cloaked in forests and mist. By day, it's a destination for hikers and nature lovers, offering sweeping views of the Berkshires. But when fog rolls in and the wind whistles through the trees, the mountain reveals a darker, more mysterious side. For centuries, visitors have reported hearing whispers that follow them along the trails. Voices that seem to drift just beyond the edge of hearing, always present, yet impossible to locate. Local legend attributes these eerie sounds to soldiers from the Revolutionary War. Many of these men reportedly froze to death on the slopes during harsh campaigns, their bodies lost to the snow and forests. Some say their spirits never found rest, eternally searching for comrades, calling out through the fog in hope of an answer. Hikers describe the whispers as soft at first, almost indistinguishable from the wind, then gradually rising to urgent murmurs that seem to echo from every direction. They speak in fractured phrases, commands, names, and sometimes cries for help, as if the mountain itself has preserved their final moments. The phenomenon isn't limited to sound. On particularly misty evenings, visitors claim to see flickering lanterns moving between the trees. The lanterns appear distant at first, bobbing gently through the fog as though carried by unseen hands. Some hikers have followed them, hoping to find other hikers, or perhaps the source of the light, only to discover that the forest is completely empty. The lanterns vanish without a trace, leaving no footprints or evidence of human passage. Even experienced park rangers admit to unsettling encounters. One veteran ranger recalled a summer evening when he was patrolling the summit. Through the swirling fog, he saw a figure approaching, dressed in colonial-era military clothing. The man's movements were deliberate, his eyes fixed on some distant point. The ranger called out, but the figure didn't respond. As he drew closer, the apparition paused, turned, and then vanished into thin air. The only evidence left behind were footprints pressed into the soft earth, which ended abruptly mid-trail, as if the soldier had stepped out of the physical world entirely. Other hikers recount hearing marching sounds when the mountain is empty, boots crunching over snow or fallen leaves, the rhythmic clatter of muskets being carried, followed by the faint murmuring of orders. When approached, the sounds fade, leaving nothing but the whispering wind. Some describe feeling a chill that runs deeper than cold air, a presence brushing past them, lingering long after the sound disappears. The mountain seems to have a memory of the past. People report sudden drops in temperature, the mist condensing unnaturally, and shadows that flicker at the edge of vision. It's as if Mount Greylock itself remembers the lives lost on its slopes, replaying fragments of history for anyone daring enough to walk its trails after the sun sets. Hikers have described seeing spectral soldiers standing silently on ridges, muskets at their sides, gazing across the valley as though scanning for enemies that no longer exist. These figures vanish when approached, leaving nothing but impressions on the grass or snow. In some accounts, the whispers seem to guide travelers rather than frighten them. Hikers who lose their way in dense fog sometimes claim that voices call their names, directing them back to marked trails or safety. Yet even this guidance is tinged with unease, as if the soldier spirits are still bound to the mountain, unable to leave until every lost soul is accounted for. There are also stories of personal encounters that have left lasting impressions. One couple reported hiking near the summit in autumn when a dense fog descended suddenly. They heard the soft murmur of voices behind them, calling indistinct names. When they turned to look, lanterns floated silently between the trees, illuminating patches of fog with a golden glow. Following the lights seemed instinctive, but the path twisted and turned unnaturally, and they eventually abandoned the pursuit. When the fog lifted the next morning, they realized they had emerged near their car, in a location that should have taken hours to reach. They both agreed they felt the presence of something guiding them, yet something profoundly otherworldly. Local historians point out that Mount Greylock was indeed the site of Revolutionary War activity, but no records describe soldiers dying on its slopes in large numbers. The discrepancy only deepens the mystery. For centuries, people have come and gone from the mountain, leaving little behind, yet the legends endure. Some say the spirits are anchored by unfinished duty, others claim they are echoes of the mountain itself, preserving the anguish of those who once fell there. Even today, hikers and ghost enthusiasts flock to Greylock, drawn by its eerie reputation. The summit, accessible yet remote, offers an opportunity to witness the unexplained firsthand. Visitors are advised to be cautious, stay on marked trails, travel in groups, and be mindful of the fog that can obscure everything in seconds. Those who've felt the whispers or glimpsed the lanterns rarely speak of it casually. The mountain leaves its mark, lingering in memory, shaping the way they perceive quiet forests and shifting mist. Some people say that if you stand still long enough at the summit during twilight, you may hear the whispers call your name, or catch a brief flash of lantern light moving through the trees. Others warn that it is better to admire from a distance. The mountain does not take kindly to intrusion. The stories continue to accumulate, each one adding a layer to Mount Greylock's enigmatic aura. Whether the soldiers are real spirits, echoes of history, or the mountain's own voice, their presence has left an indelible impression on everyone who walks its fog-laden trails. For those who venture up the paths of Mount Greylock after dusk, there is an unmistakable sense that the mountain remembers the fallen soldiers, the frozen moments, the whispered calls of comrades lost to time. The mist carries their voices, the lanterns their memory, and every shadow in the trees seems to suggest movement just beyond perception. It is a summit that is alive with history, tragedy, and spectral energy. A place where the past refuses to remain buried and the present becomes entwined with echoes from another era. Mount St. Helens rises in southwestern Washington, a volcano both feared and revered, its jagged peak a reminder of nature's uncontrollable power. Before the catastrophic eruption in 1980, it was already a striking landmark, Lush forests blanketed its slopes. Rivers ran freely through valleys, and wildlife thrived in its shadow. But on May 18, 1980, everything changed in an instant. The mountain erupted with such force that it leveled forests, sent ash clouds across the country, and claimed 57 lives. The landscape was transformed into a gray wasteland, scarred and silent, yet it did not remain lifeless. In the years following the eruption, those brave enough to return to the slopes reported disturbing phenomena. Survivors and hikers alike described hearing strange sounds amid the devastated forests, faint cries that seemed to rise from beneath the layers of ash. At first, it was difficult to believe their own ears. Could it be the wind moving through hollowed trunks, or the echoes of rivers beneath the debris? But the sounds persisted. Anguished screams, low moans, and whispers carried by the breeze. Some claimed the voices were not human at all, but something older, something rooted in the mountain itself. Native American tribes in the region have long spoken of Mount St. Helens as sacred ground. Before the eruption, they believed the mountain was protected by powerful spirits, guardians who maintained balance and peace. When the eruption tore through the landscape, tribes say the event awakened these ancient beings, angered that their sanctuary had been violated. Their presence was subtle but undeniable. Trees bent strangely, rocks shifted without cause, and the air carried a tangible tension, as if the mountain itself was alive and aware of intruders. Hikers and explorers venturing into the blast zone often report more than just eerie sounds. Many speak of phantom figures drifting across the gray wasteland, moving through the charred remains of trees and ash-covered meadows. These apparitions are described as shadowy and indistinct, sometimes human in shape, sometimes more monstrous. Their features obscured by smoke and mist. Witnesses claim they vanish when approached, leaving only the sensation of being watched. Others have seen fleeting movements near the crater, figures gliding just above the ground, almost blending with the volcanic haze. The crater itself is particularly chilling. On moonless nights, some hikers claim to have seen glowing eyes staring from within its depths, a light too constant and focused to be a reflection of stars or distant lamps. The eyes seem to track movement, following travelers as they pass, yet vanish when looked at directly. It's as if something ancient and vigilant resides inside the crater, guarding its scarred domain. One hiker reported being unable to sleep in her tent near the rim. She awoke to find the soft glow of eyes shining at her from across the ash plain. When she blinked, they were gone, leaving her with only the cold wind and the sense of being observed. Even daytime excursions can carry unsettling experiences. Walkers report sudden drops in temperature, a chill that seems to cut through clothing, lingering in patches as though something unseen is moving through the area. Some have felt unseen hands brush past them, or experienced the sensation of being pulled slightly off course while following the trails. Others claim that the ground beneath their feet seems to vibrate subtly, as though the mountain remembers the tremors that shook it so violently decades ago. There are accounts of equipment malfunctioning for no reason. Cameras fail to record, compasses spin wildly, and electronic devices die inexplicably. These phenomena are especially common near the crater, where the ash and rock create electromagnetic anomalies, or so scientists explain. But those who have experienced it firsthand often insist the explanation is insufficient. The sensations are personal, tangible, and often frighteningly intelligent. As if the mountain is reacting to the presence of intruders. Some survivors of the eruption have returned to confront their memories, and many report unsettling encounters. One man described hiking along the northern slope, remembering the day he narrowly escaped the blast. As dusk fell, he heard the faint screams of voices he had known, intermingled with cries he had never heard before. He looked around and saw shadowy figures moving silently through the ruins of a forest that had been leveled decades earlier. For a brief moment, he felt he was witnessing the past replaying itself, a spectral memory etched into the ash. When he tried to approach, the figures melted into the gray haze, leaving him shaken and awed. Local folklore suggests that the spirits of the eruption are not merely echoes of the dead, but guardians entities awakened to prevent further disruption. They are protective yet terrifying, enforcing the mountain's dominance over those who venture too close. Some say they are reminders that Mount St. Helens cannot be tamed, a living monument to nature's fury and the lives lost. The ash fields, the twisted remnants of forests, and the crater itself are imbued with their presence, a constant reminder of the eruption's power and the spiritual forces it stirred. Those who hike Mount St. Helens today often do so with a sense of reverence and caution. Even in bright daylight, the ash-covered landscape feels otherworldly. Visitors speak of being watched, of hearing whispers that have no source, and of feeling drawn toward the crater by an unseen force. For some, the experience is awe-inspiring. For others, it is terrifying. Every rustle of ash or shift in the fog carries the weight of memory, a reminder that beneath the surface, the mountain remembers the past, the lost lives, and the spirits it has awakened. Mount Katahdin, the highest peak in Maine, rises abruptly from the forested landscape like a jagged crown, its cliffs and ridges shrouded in mist much of the year. For centuries, the Penobscot people revered the mountain as sacred, warning outsiders to approach with respect. They spoke of Pomola, a powerful guardian spirit with the body of a man and the head of a bird, who dwells at the summit and protects the mountain from those who would disrespect it. According to legend, Pomola is not a mere story to scare tourists. He is a force of nature, swift, merciless, and unforgiving. For those unfamiliar with the warnings, Katahdin can seem inviting, even exhilarating. The Appalachian Trail ends here, and hikers from across the country trek up its slopes to experience the rugged beauty and sweeping views from the top. But the mountain is notoriously unpredictable. Clouds can descend in moments, visibility can drop to mere feet, and the wind can howl with unexpected ferocity. Some hikers have felt invisible hands pushing against them, as if the mountain itself were alive and resisting their ascent. Stories of strange phenomena abound. Experienced climbers report sudden storms that seem to appear out of nowhere, fierce gusts of wind that knock people off balance, and an unsettling sense of being watched. One hiker recalled climbing Katahdin on a clear morning, only for a sudden squall to whip around him, funneling through the cliffs like the breath of a giant. He struggled to maintain his footing as the wind seemed to shove him backward, and he later swore he could see a shadowy figure at the ridge above, tall with wings, stretching wide, watching him carefully before disappearing into the mist. Local lore attributes these events to Pomola's influence. According to the Penobscot, the spirit punishes those who show arrogance or disrespect toward the mountain. People who mock the legends or ignore the sacred rituals sometimes vanish without explanation. Hikers have been reported missing, even in familiar sections of the trails, only to be found days later, miles away, or, in some cases, never at all. Others have described hearing strange calls carried on the wind, a voice that is not quite human, shrill and commanding, cutting through the whistling gusts. Even seasoned guides approach the summit cautiously. One guide, leading a group during an unusually warm autumn, described a sudden change in weather as they neared the peak. The sun disappeared behind a wall of clouds, and temperatures dropped dramatically. Wind roared from every direction at once, pushing them sideways. Trees bent unnaturally, and snow that had melted days before was blown across the trail in sheets. He later admitted that he felt a presence, something enormous and unseen, observing their every step, reminding them of the mountain's ancient power. Many hikers report visual encounters as well. Shadows flit across the cliffs, glimpses of winged forms at the edges of their vision, or a tall figure standing motionless on a ridge before vanishing without a sound. Some describe hearing footsteps in the rocks above, though no one is there. Others speak of sudden drops in temperature, their breath freezing instantly, as if the mountain itself is exhaling. In these moments, the air feels charged, as though Pomola is aware of each step taken toward the summit. The mountain's geography seems to amplify the supernatural tales. Katahdin's cliffs, ridges, and sudden elevations create pockets where sound carries strangely. The wind whistles through narrow gullies, producing voices and cries that seem real but cannot be traced. One group of hikers described hearing what sounded like someone calling their names in panic, only to find the ridges empty. Another reported seeing a faint glow in a crevice near the summit, flickering as if from a lantern. Though the trail had no signs of other hikers, legends say Paranormal is not merely protective but vengeful. Those who attempt to climb without reverence or dismiss the spirit's existence are said to be subject to his wrath. People have reported losing sense of direction, falling into sudden gullies, or being struck by violent gusts that feel purposeful rather than natural. Even experienced climbers admit that the mountain demands respect. Katahdin is not forgiving to arrogance or carelessness. Despite these warnings, adventurers continue to challenge Katahdin, drawn by its beauty and the thrill of reaching the summit. Some claim to have glimpsed Paranormal, a fleeting figure perched on a crag, wings folded, surveying the forest below. Others feel his presence as they pause at the final ledge, an overwhelming sensation of being watched, a pressure in the air that is both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Those who heed the legends often describe the experience as humbling, a reminder that they are visitors in a land that is ancient and powerful, a mountain alive with history and spirit. Even at the base of the peak, Katahdin maintains its mysterious aura. Hikers report sudden chills in warm weather, rustling sounds with no visible source, and shadows that move independently of light. Many have been warned by locals to never attempt to climb alone, to always acknowledge the mountain's sacredness, and to respect the warnings passed down through generations. Those who do not, the stories say, may encounter more than just a physical challenge. They may awaken Paranormal's attention and find themselves lost in ways beyond explanation. The Penobscot insist that the mountain is a living presence, not merely a landscape to be conquered. Paranormal embodies the spirit of Katahdin itself, a guardian of the forests, the cliffs, and the sacred ground. To ascend the peak safely is to acknowledge that power, to tread lightly, and to move with humility. Many climbers emerge with awe, recounting strange sensations, sudden gusts, or fleeting shapes glimpsed through the mist, experiences that are difficult to explain but impossible to forget. Mount Katahdin's reputation as a cursed peak is not merely a tale to frighten hikers. It is a warning embedded in the mountain's very nature. The cliffs, the wind, the fog, and the sudden storms all serve as reminders that the land has a will of its own. Those who respect it may pass safely, their memories enriched by beauty and the sense of something larger than themselves. Those who do not may vanish, misled by the winds, ensnared by the mountain's fury, or touched by Paranormal's judgment. Mount San Antonio, commonly called Mount Baldy, rises abruptly from the edges of Los Angeles, its bare, wind-swept summit visible for miles. To the casual observer, it's a striking yet serene landscape, perfect for weekend hikes or climbing challenges. But beneath the beauty lies a darker side, a mountain that seems to guard secrets buried deep within its cliffs and ravines. For decades, Mount Baldy has been associated with disappearances, unexplained phenomena, and stories that make even seasoned hikers pause before setting foot on its slopes. The mountain's history is littered with missing person cases. Hikers vanish suddenly, sometimes on well-marked trails, sometimes along the steep, rocky ridges. Search parties comb the area tirelessly, yet often find nothing. No footprints, no broken branches, no clue as to where the person might have gone. Locals warn newcomers that certain areas carry a bad feeling, especially the deep ravines where the terrain seems to swallow sound and light. In these places, compasses spin uncontrollably, GPS devices fail, and cell phones lose all reception. It's as if the mountain refuses to be mapped, refusing to reveal its secrets. Stories from climbers abound. Many describe an eerie sensation of being watched, or the unmistakable feeling that someone is moving just beyond the edge of vision. Some hikers report hearing voices, faint and distant, calling their names as if guiding them or luring them further into danger. One climber recounted that, while ascending a narrow ridge, he distinctly heard a man whispering his name, urging him to follow. He turned quickly, flashlight sweeping the slope, but there was no one there. The voice had come from nowhere, yet it was undeniably real, leaving him shaken and unsure whether to proceed. Search and rescue teams have their own unsettling accounts. In the ravines where many have disappeared, Teams often report seeing human-shaped shadows moving against the light. These figures appear and vanish without warning, sometimes flitting along cliff edges or appearing at the top of ridges, only to dissolve into the air. One veteran rescuer admitted that, during a particularly tense search, he felt a strange resistance in the air, a sense that the mountain itself was holding something back. Sometimes, he said, the mountain doesn't want to give them back. Weather on Mount Baldy only amplifies its sense of mystery. Sudden fogs roll in from the valleys below, reducing visibility to a few feet. Winds whip through the canyons, carrying distant echoes that sound like footsteps or whispers. Snow in the higher elevations can conceal entire ravines, hiding both natural hazards and, perhaps, traces of the lost. Hikers speak of sharp drops in temperature, sudden gusts that knock them off balance, and strange, inexplicable shadows in the mist. Even in daylight, the mountain feels alive, watching, judging, and occasionally intervening. Some climbers believe the mountain has a malevolent intelligence. Those who have ventured alone report a persistent sense of unease, the feeling that they are not truly in control of their movement. Trails seem to shift, landmarks appear out of place, and the ravines seem to elongate or contract depending on where you are. One experienced hiker told of a moment when he was following a familiar path, only to find himself at the edge of a cliff he had never seen before. The ground beneath his boots seemed to pulse, as if the mountain itself were breathing, alive with the energy of those who had vanished over the years. Others suggest that Mount Baldy is a kind of liminal space, where the natural and the supernatural intersect. The compasses fail not because of magnetic anomalies alone, but because the mountain does not wish to be charted. Voices call, not as tricks of the mind, but as warnings or tests. Shadows are glimpses of trapped souls, moving between the world of the living and something else entirely. Whatever the explanation, the evidence is unsettling enough to make climbers approach with caution. In the aftermath of a disappearance, friends and family often speak of feeling the presence of their loved ones on the mountain. One woman recounted returning to the site where her brother vanished, hearing soft footsteps behind her as she walked the trail. When she turned, there was no one there, yet the sensation of being followed was undeniable. Others have seen lights flickering in the ravines after dark, lantern-like glows that appear and disappear with no discernible source. These accounts are repeated so frequently that the local lore is impossible to ignore. Mount Baldy does not easily release those who wander too far. Despite the danger, hikers continue to climb. The mountain's challenge is irresistible to many, and the views from the summit are spectacular. Yet the stories linger, whispered among local climbers and search and rescue teams alike. They tell of the voices in the mist, the shadows flitting against the light, and the inexplicable sense that the mountain watches every move. Some emerge unscathed, telling tales of sudden chills and eerie sounds that vanished as mysteriously as they appeared. Others never return, leaving only their memory and the mountain's silent warning. Mount San Antonio is more than just a peak. It is a guardian of secrets, a place where nature's beauty masks a darker truth. The ravines, cliffs, and trails hold stories that resist explanation, voices calling through the fog, shadows slipping across ridges, and an unshakable feeling that the mountain has a will of its own. Every hiker who steps onto Mount Baldy becomes part of that ongoing narrative, their footsteps adding to the history of those who have vanished, watched, or been called by something beyond human understanding. Mount Adams rises sharply in southern Washington, its snow-capped peak looming over the surrounding forests and valleys. Known for its rugged beauty and challenging trails, it is a destination for climbers and campers alike. Yet beyond its picturesque slopes lies a deep and persistent mystery. The strange, silent lights that appear above its treeline, flickering and dancing in ways that defy explanation. For decades, Mount Adams has been associated with unexplained phenomena, leaving scientists, hikers, and locals alike both fascinated and unsettled. The lights are most often described as small, glowing orbs, hovering silently above the trees. Sometimes they appear white, other times tinged with blue or red, moving gracefully through the night sky. almost as if observing the land below. Scientists have attempted to explain the phenomena using natural theories, atmospheric reflections, bioluminescent insects, or distant vehicle lights. Yet none of these explanations fully account for the behavior, sudden appearance, or disappearance of the orbs. The lights can vanish instantly, leaving no trace, or move in ways that seem purposeful, deliberate, and intelligent. For the local Yakima people, the lights are not merely unexplained curiosities, they are sacred. Elders tell stories passed down through generations, describing the orbs as spirits of sky beings who descend to watch over the earth. These beings, they say, are neither malevolent nor entirely benign. They are guardians, observers of human activity, ensuring that the land is respected. Those who venture into the mountains with arrogance or ill intent are said to attract the attention of these spirits, and sometimes never return. The most chilling account comes from the 1970s. A group of campers, eager to witness the orbs for themselves, set up camp near one of Mount Adams' forested ridges. According to reports, they saw the lights dancing just beyond the tree line, moving silently, almost beckoning. Intrigued and emboldened, the campers decided to follow the orbs, leaving their campsite behind. Hours passed, and when authorities arrived to check on them, they found the campsite undisturbed in one sense. The tents were standing, the campfire still smoldering, yet the campers were gone. No tracks led away, no personal belongings remained except what they had left inside the tents. It was as though the mountain had swallowed them whole, leaving only the silent glow of the fire to mark their presence. Since then, hikers and climbers have reported similar encounters. People claim to see the lights moving through dense forest or along ridges in ways that defy natural explanation. Some have felt drawn toward them, an irresistible compulsion to follow the orbs, only to find that the terrain becomes treacherous or disorienting. Trails seem to twist unnaturally, and hikers report sudden fog, abrupt drops in temperature, and the sensation of being watched. Those who turn back often speak of relief mixed with lingering unease, as if the spirits themselves were aware of every step. Even daytime experiences are not immune to the mountain's mystery. Some hikers have described subtle glimmers in the tree line during late afternoon, shifting and flickering in the corners of vision. Others have felt an inexplicable pull, as though the orb's presence lingers long after night falls. Guiding attention, bending perception. Electronics often fail in areas where the lights are frequently observed. Cameras fail to capture them, compasses spin wildly, and radios pick up static that mimics faint whispers. Many conclude that Mount Adams itself is imbued with a force beyond conventional understanding, a realm where the natural and supernatural intersect. Stories from local Yakima elders describe more than mere observation. They say the sky beings are not always passive. Sometimes, they appear to test human resolve or humility. Those who disrespect the mountain, take more than they should, or treat the land carelessly may experience sudden disorientation, injuries without obvious cause, or even vanish entirely. Hikers who have survived encounters with the lights often speak of their experiences in hushed tones. One woman described being drawn up a ridge by a series of blue orbs, only to feel an invisible force pushing her back, guiding her to a safer path. She reported that the lights never appeared threatening, yet the sensation of being watched was unmistakable, as though something ancient and intelligent was observing her. Another climber recounted seeing the orbs circle his campsite before retreating into the sky, leaving him with a profound sense of both awe and terror. The phenomenon persists to this day. Even seasoned mountaineers, familiar with every trail and crevice, admit that the mountain feels different at night, charged with an energy that is impossible to explain. The silent lights are unpredictable, appearing without warning, sometimes remaining for hours, sometimes vanishing within seconds. Those who attempt to photograph them rarely succeed. The orbs seem to evade all forms of documentation, existing just beyond the reach of human understanding. Mount Adams is not only a geographic landmark, but a spiritual nexus, where natural beauty intersects with the unknown. The orbs remind all who visit that the mountain is alive in ways that extend beyond science. It watches, it tests, and it guards. For the Yakima people, it has always been sacred. For the modern hiker, it is both breathtaking and haunting, a place where curiosity can become a dangerous temptation, where the lights of the sky are more than they appear, and where the vanished campers of the past serve as a solemn reminder of the mountainous power. To venture into Mount Adams is to enter a realm where the ordinary rules of the world do not always apply. The silent lights hover, watch, and sometimes guide. Yet they also challenge the arrogance of those who think they can command nature, whether manifestations of ancient spirits, phenomena science has yet to explain, or some combination of both. The lights are real enough to leave a lasting impression on those who witness them. They are a reminder that some places in the world are alive, and that some mysteries are best approached with reverence. Mount Charleston rises sharply from the scorching expanse of Nevada's Mojave Desert, its snow-capped peaks creating a striking contrast to the arid landscape below. To hikers and visitors, the mountain is a haven from the desert heat, offering cooler air, dense forests, and winding trails. Yet beneath its serene beauty lies a history marred by tragedy and haunted by lingering spirits. Over the decades, Mount Charleston has gained a reputation as a place where the living and the dead brush against one another, where unexplained phenomena accompany the memory of lives lost far too suddenly. One of the most infamous events associated with the mountain is a plane crash in 1955 that claimed 14 lives. On a clear afternoon, a small passenger aircraft veered off course and collided with the rugged terrain. The wreckage was scattered across the slopes, and despite rescue efforts, there were no survivors. The tragedy left an indelible mark on the mountain, and since that day, visitors have reported unsettling occurrences that seem connected to the crash. Hikers and campers often describe hearing the roar of jet engines high in the sky, a sound so vivid that it seems as though an aircraft is approaching. But when they look up, the sky is empty, and the noise fades into sudden, unnerving silence. Some claim that the echoes are not merely auditory illusions, but remnants of the crash itself, replaying through the mountain as a ghostly memory embedded in the air. The sounds are most commonly reported near the lookout points, where the terrain drops sharply and the desert stretches endlessly below. Beyond the auditory phenomena, visual sightings have fueled the mountain's reputation. Many visitors describe seeing the apparition of a pilot standing at the edge of the lookout points. Dressed in the uniform of the 1950s, his gaze fixed endlessly toward the desert below. Witnesses report a feeling of profound sadness emanating from the figure, as if he is eternally reliving the moment of impact or mourning the passengers he could not save. Some hikers have felt an icy chill pass over them in the middle of summer when the figure appears. A sudden and inexplicable drop in temperature that seems to accompany the presence of the ghost. There are accounts of hikers hearing disembodied footsteps along the trails near the crash site. These steps mimic the sound of heavy boots moving over rocks and dirt. But when the hikers turn to look, no one is there. Some have described the feeling of being followed, a pressure at their back or a fleeting shadow in the corner of their vision, vanishing whenever they attempt to confront it directly. The mountain, many believe, preserves these remnants of the past, replaying them for those who are willing or unwitting enough to notice. Search and rescue teams have also shared stories that defy explanation. On occasions when crews return to the area to mark the plane crash site or maintain safety trails, they report hearing the sound of engines and spotting fleeting figures near the lookout points. Equipment sometimes malfunctions inexplicably. Radios pick up static where none should exist. Compasses swing wildly, and cameras fail to capture the spectral figures. These disturbances are brief but intense, leaving professionals with the unnerving sense that Mount Charleston itself resists being fully mapped or understood. Even wildlife seems to react to the mountain's unusual energy. Birds, normally undisturbed by hikers, are reported to fly erratically near the lookout points or along the crash site, avoiding areas where visitors report ghostly encounters. Deer and other animals are said to pause, ears perked, gazing into empty space as if sensing something unseen. For those attuned to the subtleties of nature, these behaviors add an additional layer of unease. as though the living creatures of the mountain are aware of presences invisible to human eyes. Visitors have also described moments where the ghostly pilot appears to interact subtly with them. Some report hearing faint warnings or feeling a gentle nudge guiding them away from dangerous cliffs. Others, however, have experienced more disturbing interactions, visions of sudden accidents, or glimpses of shadowy figures moving across the rocks, instilling a deep, instinctive fear. The encounters vary in intensity, but nearly everyone who experiences them leaves with a heightened awareness of the mountain as history and an unshakable sense of its lingering spirits. Mount Charleston's reputation as haunted is compounded by the mountain's natural environment. Its steep cliffs, dense forests, and sudden weather changes create conditions where perception can be easily distorted. Fog rolls in unexpectedly, casting shadows across trails, and snow patches reflect sunlight in ways that can make distant figures appear eerily human. Yet, even when environmental explanations are considered, the consistency of reports across decades and from hikers of varying experience suggests that something more than natural phenomena may be at play. Local lore among Nevada residents and mountain guides emphasizes the need for respect. Those who venture into Mount Charleston are advised to remain cautious, stay on trails, and heed warnings about sudden weather changes and the treacherous terrain. But there is also an understanding that the mountain holds memories that are deeply personal and perhaps spiritual. The stories of the plane crash, the pilot's ghost, and the spectral echoes of jet engines serve as reminders that Mount Charleston is more than a recreational escape. It is a monument to lives lost, a vessel of lingering energy, and a place where the past continues to whisper through the wind. Even today, hikers recount the same phenomenon: sounds, shadowy figures, inexplicable chills, proof that the mountain has retained a connection to its tragic history. The ghostly pilot remains at the lookout point, silently watching the desert below, a sentinel frozen in time, while the echoes of engines remind the living that tragedy is never far from Mount Charleston's slopes. For those who visit the mountain, offers breathtaking views, quiet trails, and the chance to experience nature at its peak. But it also carries a weight, a presence that is felt more than seen, a reminder that some tragedies leave a permanent mark on the world. Mount Elbert, the towering giant of Colorado's Rockies, stands as the state's highest peak, rising to 14,440 feet. Its slopes, often dusted with snow, even into the warmer months, attract climbers, hikers, and adventurers eager to conquer its challenging terrain and experience the breathtaking vistas from the summit. Yet, beyond its natural beauty and recreational appeal, Mount Elbert carries a reputation that chills even the most experienced mountaineers. The mountain is said to echo more than just sound. It echoes souls. Those who spend the night on its ridges often speak of strange, unexplained phenomena. Campers have recorded faint whispers carried by the wind, voices that call out names as though reaching across time. Some dismiss these as tricks of the imagination, the sound of wind interacting with the mountain's rugged contours, or the nervous imagination of climbers exhausted by altitude and cold. But for many, the experiences are far too vivid, too personal, to be easily explained. Hikers report a sense of being watched, of footsteps on snow that show no footprints, and of fleeting shadows moving just beyond the light of their headlamps. One of the most widely recounted incidents occurred in 2012, when two hikers set up camp near one of Mount Elbert's ridges for an overnight stay. As darkness fell and the temperature plummeted, they noticed what appeared to be torchlight flickering across a distant slope, suggesting another camp nearby. Curious and perhaps a little unnerved, they hiked toward the light, expecting to encounter fellow climbers. But when they reached the spot, there was nothing. No tents, no footprints, not even a trace that anyone had been there. Only untouched snow stretched across the ridge, pristine and undisturbed. The torchlight, the hikers later admitted, had seemed to move with purpose, almost as though guiding them to the summit or warning them away. The next day, one of the hikers left a note in the summit log. "The mountain was alive last night." Others who have read the note report similar experiences. "A fleeting shadow here, a whisper in the wind there, evidence that Mount Elbert has a presence of its own, an energy that observes, echoes, and perhaps remembers. Some believe that the mountain holds memories of those who have ascended its slopes before, capturing fragments of their essence and replaying them to those who linger overnight. In this way, the mountain becomes not just a physical challenge, but a spiritual landscape, with a living brush against the echoes of the departed. Witnesses have described hearing conversations in the wind, faint and overlapping, as if the mountain channels countless voices at once. Climbers report hearing their own names whispered, sometimes multiple times in succession, even when hiking alone or in otherwise silent areas. One hiker recounted pausing mid-trail to listen, certain he was imagining the sounds, only for the whispers to intensify and then vanish as abruptly as they had begun. The effect is both mesmerizing and unsettling, a reminder that Mount Elbert's power may extend beyond the tangible, into the realm of the inexplicable. In addition to auditory experiences, hikers have recorded unusual visual phenomena. Some describe seeing lights on distant ridges that vanish when approached. Others glimpse fleeting figures at the edge of the tree line or along snowfields, only to have them disappear entirely upon closer inspection. These occurrences are not limited to a particular section of the mountain. They have been reported from the lower trails to the summit itself, suggesting that the mountain's unusual activity permeates its entire landscape. Even experienced mountaineers, familiar with the trails and terrain, admit that the mountain can feel alive, as if responding to human presence, observing each movement, and occasionally intervening in subtle, unexplainable ways. Mount Elbert's reputation has grown in part because of its summit log, a communal record left behind by those who reached the peak. Countless hikers have written about unusual experiences, whispers, lights, shadows, and others reading these entries report feeling a sense of anticipation, a heightened awareness of the mountain's energy. Some notes describe attempts to capture the phenomenon on camera, though equipment often fails mysteriously. Cameras refuse to focus, flashlights dim unexpectedly, and recordings pick up faint static or voices that vanish when reviewed. These repeated anomalies have convinced many that the mountain preserves its own memories, replaying them to those who dare to spend the night along its ridges. Weather and terrain seem to amplify the mountain's mysterious qualities. Sudden gusts of wind carve through narrow valleys, creating eerie echoes that carry across ridges. Clouds descend rapidly, reducing visibility to mere feet and casting shifting shadows that appear almost humanoid. Snowfields reflect ambient light in unusual ways, making distant shapes appear and disappear. While some effects are explainable as natural phenomena, the consistency and specificity of reports suggest that something more is at work, that Mount Elbert is not merely a static landscape, but a living, reactive presence. The mountain's mystique draws not only adventurers seeking physical challenge, but also those drawn by the allure of the unexplained. Campers who linger after dark are more likely to experience the whispers, lights, and shadows. Yet even daytime hikers report fleeting sensations of observation or sudden drops in temperature without clear cause. Whether these encounters are paranormal or psychological, they reinforce the idea that Mount Elbert has a presence that is impossible to ignore. Over the years, Mount Elbert has become more than just a destination for climbing. It is a place where stories accumulate and where the echoes of past visitors mingle with the living. Each whisper, each flicker of light, each unexplained shadow becomes part of the mountain's narrative, leaving climbers with a sense of awe and unease. The echoes are a reminder that the mountain is alive in a way that defies measurement, a silent witness to every ascent, every moment of fear and wonder, and perhaps a guardian of souls who linger long after their time has passed. Mount McKinley, officially known as Denali, towers over Alaska as the tallest peak in North America, its icy slopes piercing the sky and dominating the vast, unforgiving wilderness below. To climbers, it is the ultimate challenge, relentless, beautiful, and terrifying in equal measure. Yet beyond its physical dangers, Denali has long been associated with strange and unsettling phenomena. The mountain is said to be haunted by the remnants of those who have perished on its slopes, their presence lingering in the endless white. A silent warning to anyone who dares to ascend. Climbers and Sherpas who have spent time on Denali often speak of ghost ropes. These are climbing lines that appear taut and ready, leading up the mountain into dense fog or snow. Yet no climber is attached. The ropes seem anchored to nothing, swaying gently in the wind as if someone invisible is climbing alongside the living. Many who encounter them report a sudden chill, a sensation that unseen eyes are observing their every move. Some have admitted to cutting the rope, only to see it reappear in the same spot the following day, untouched and undisturbed, as though the mountain refuses to let the phantom climber be forgotten. Beyond the ghost ropes, climbers speak of the feeling of invisible hands tugging at their packs, urging them to turn back. It is subtle at first, a light pull, a shift in weight that seems unexplainable. Yet in some cases, the tug grows insistent, a silent force guiding travelers away from unseen hazards. Many who have experienced this report sudden changes in weather soon after, as if the mountain itself intervenes to protect the living while reminding them of its dominance. The winds howl louder, and whiteouts descend, making navigation nearly impossible. Those who ignore the warnings often find themselves disoriented, forced to retreat with frostbitten fingers and aching muscles. Among the most chilling tales is that of a ghostly expedition lost decades ago in a ferocious blizzard. Legends say the climbers underestimated Denali's treachery and were caught high on a ridge when a storm swept in without warning. By morning, no trace remained, except the stories passed down by guides and fellow mountaineers. Locals and seasoned climbers claim that during the winter solstice, lanterns can sometimes be seen flickering across the snow, moving steadily up the slope as though the doomed team continues its ascent for eternity. Some say the lights mimic the path of their final climb, tracing the same dangerous ridge that ended their lives. A spectral reenactment that chills even the bravest climbers. Many who witness these apparitions describe a profound sense of sadness and inevitability. The lanterns appear distant at first, small pinpoints of light in the vast white expanse, then grow closer as they follow the curves of ridges and valleys. Some hikers report hearing faint voices carried on the wind, muffled calls for help, laughter, or the simple sound of boots crunching snow on ice. Yet, when they reach the spot, nothing remains but pristine snow, untouched by human hands. The experience leaves climbers with a haunting awareness of Denali's dual nature, breathtaking in its beauty, but merciless in its demand for respect. Even during clear weather, climbers report an eerie stillness on certain ridges, as if the mountain is holding its breath. Shadows appear at the edge of vision, vanishing when observed directly. Tracks sometimes seem to lead nowhere, interrupted abruptly, as if the snow itself refuses to hold a shape. Campers on the slopes have recounted waking to find their tents disturbed, gear shifted, or footprints around their camp that do not belong to anyone in their party. Though some explanations suggest wind or animal interference, the regularity of these occurrences has convinced many that Denali retains the essence of those who have perished, replaying fragments of their journey for anyone willing to witness. Mount McKinley's haunting extends to the psychological as well as the physical. Climbers often describe an overwhelming sense of isolation, magnified by the mountain's sheer scale and relentless weather. Even experienced mountaineers, accustomed to high-altitude challenges, report feelings of unease, of being observed by unseen presences. Some feel nudges in the snow, subtle shifts in air pressure, or fleeting glimpses of figures that vanish when approached. These experiences, combined with the tales of ghost ropes and flickering lanterns, suggest that Denali is not merely a formidable natural obstacle, but a place where the past and present intersect. Legends of Denali's spectral climbers serve as a warning and a lesson. They remind those who ascend that the mountain is alive in ways beyond human understanding. The spirits of lost climbers, the ghostly ropes, and the flickering lanterns are not simply stories for entertainment. They are reminders of the mountain's power and the fragility of life in its extreme environment. Many climbers speak of returning from Denali with a newfound respect, humbled by the sense that they share the slopes with unseen companions. witnesses, and guides. Over time, these stories have shaped the culture of Denali expeditions. Guides teach climbers not only to respect the physical dangers, but also to be aware of the mountain's intangible presence. Campers are warned to tread lightly, observe the environment, and honor those who came before. Some even leave small markers or notes at high camps, acknowledging the spirits of lost climbers. A gesture of respect for the invisible travelers who continue their endless journey through the snow and fog. Denali is more than a mountain. It is a monument to both natural majesty and human fragility. Its endless white slopes hold the echoes of countless climbers who dared to challenge it and were claimed by its unforgiving conditions. The ghost ropes sway silently, invisible hands tug at packs, and the flickering lanterns climb tirelessly along ridges each winter solstice. The mountain stands as a sentinel of the past, a living witness to the courage, hubris, and perseverance of those who venture into its heights. Mount Diablo rises abruptly from the rolling hills of California's East Bay, its jagged summit cutting a dramatic silhouette against the sky. To casual visitors, it may seem a picturesque spot for hiking and sightseeing, offering panoramic views of the surrounding valleys and cities. But for centuries, the mountain has carried a far darker reputation, earning its ominous name and a place in local lore as a site of supernatural mystery. Known as the Devil's Resting Place, Mount Diablo is said to harbor forces that defy explanation, drawing curious travelers into encounters that linger long after they descend. Legends surrounding the mountain are ancient. Native tribes speak of a malevolent spirit exiled from the underworld, condemned to dwell upon its slopes. This entity, they warn, is not content to remain hidden. It interacts with the living, often in ways that are subtle, sinister, and unnerving. Those who venture near the summit after dark may sense a presence, a watchful gaze that seems to follow each step, or feel a sudden chill that cuts through even the warmest summer night. Many visitors report seeing glowing red eyes peering from the forest or rock formations as they hike the trails. These eyes are said to vanish the instant someone attempts to approach, leaving only darkness and an unsettling silence in their wake. Some claim that phantom fires ignite spontaneously along ridges, flickering for just long enough to catch the eye, then extinguishing as if the flames themselves were illusions conjured by the mountain. These visual phenomena are often accompanied by disorienting sounds, whispers carried on the wind, the crackle of flames that leave no ashes, and occasional laughter that echoes from nowhere. Motorists are not immune to the mountain's strange influence. Numerous accounts describe vehicles losing power as they near the summit, engines stalling without mechanical explanation. Drivers report trying to restart their cars, only to find that electronics fail and compasses spin uncontrollably. The smell of sulfur often accompanies these events, a pungent, almost tangible warning that the mountain's darker presence is near. Some interpret these experiences as the spirit's way of asserting dominion, a reminder that the mountain is not merely terrain but a living, watchful entity. The most chilling stories occur at night, particularly around midnight. Visitors who remain after dark claim to hear a laughter carried on the wind, high-pitched, eerie, and unmistakably human in tone. The sound seems to come from multiple directions at once, weaving between the trees and rocks, echoing off ridges. Those who hear it report a feeling of dread, as if they are being mocked or tested. A few brave or foolish hikers have attempted to trace the laughter to its source, only to find themselves lost among the trails, disoriented by fog, shadows, and an uncanny sense of time stretching unnaturally. Disappearances are another dark thread woven into Mount Diablo's history. Travelers have gone missing for hours, sometimes days, only to be found wandering in areas far from where they last stood. In several accounts, hikers recount seeing figures at a distance who vanish when approached. These apparitions often appear just beyond the tree line, glowing faintly or silhouetted against the moonlight, moving in ways that defy human ability. Though some explanations suggest psychological stress or the mountain's confusing terrain, the consistency and eeriness of the reports suggest something more malevolent at work. Even in daylight, the mountain exhibits strange behaviors. Hikers have described sudden, unexplained gusts of wind that extinguish campfires, fogs that rise from valleys without apparent weather causes, and shadows that stretch and twist against the sun. Trails that seem familiar can become disorienting, and landmarks appear to shift or vanish entirely. Many believe these distortions are the influence of the spirit that inhabits the mountain, a presence capable of manipulating perception to keep intruders off balance. Some locals claim that attempts to communicate with the entity are met with mixed results. Those who call out in curiosity or defiance may hear whispered responses, faint and almost melodic, drifting through the air. Others report visions or feelings of being touched by invisible hands. The experiences vary in intensity, but are almost universally unsettling, leaving a lingering sense of unease even after leaving the mountain. The mountain's notoriety has grown over time, not just through first-hand accounts, but through cultural stories and urban legends. Writers, hikers, and paranormal enthusiasts have long chronicled experiences at Mount Diablo, ensuring that the mountain's reputation persists. The combination of natural hazards, steep trails, sudden weather changes, and treacherous rocks, with the mountain's supernatural lore, creates a uniquely dangerous and mesmerizing environment. Visitors are warned to respect both the terrain and the spirits that are said to dwell there, as ignoring these warnings has, according to legend, led to inexplicable injuries, misadventures, and profound psychological effects. Despite its fearsome reputation, or perhaps because of it, Mount Diablo continues to attract adventurers seeking both challenge and mystery. The mountain's trails are busy during the day, yet as night falls, a silence descends that feels unnatural. The winds carry voices that may be real or imagined. The ridges hold shadows that vanish when confronted, and the red eyes in the distance remind hikers that the mountain is never truly empty. Even those who only visit briefly are affected by its atmosphere, leaving with a heightened sense of the unseen, a story to tell, and a lingering wariness of what might be watching from the devil's resting place. Mount Lemmon, rising sharply above the city of Tucson, Arizona, is known for its breathtaking vistas, dense pine forests, and the prestigious Mount Lemmon Observatory perched near its summit. The observatory draws astronomers and stargazers from across the country, eager to explore the heavens through powerful telescopes and pristine mountain air. Yet, amid the quiet hum of scientific instruments and the awe-inspiring expanse of the night sky, the mountain has earned a reputation that chills even the most skeptical. The observatory is said to be haunted, a place where the ordinary and the otherworldly intersect in ways that defy explanation. Staff and visitors alike have reported a series of strange occurrences, beginning with seemingly ordinary sounds that quickly become unsettling. Footsteps echo along hallways long after everyone has left, and doors that were securely closed are sometimes found ajar in the morning. Several astronomers recount hearing whispers in empty rooms, faint, unintelligible voices that vanish when approached. Equipment often acts strangely during these moments. Computers flicker inexplicably, monitors display distorted images, and telescopes briefly lose focus, as if unseen hands are interfering with the observation of the stars. One of the most disturbing accounts occurred during a violent summer lightning storm. A lone technician had been working late, monitoring a telescope as heavy rain lashed the observatory through the glass of the upper windows. He noticed a man standing outside on the roof's edge, completely unaffected by the downpour. Rain streamed off his coat, yet he remained perfectly dry, illuminated only by flashes of lightning. Alarmed, the technician rushed to open the door and confront the figure, but the man had vanished. All that remained were footprints scorched into the surface, as if the ground itself had been burned where he had stood. The technician described the sensation as an overwhelming combination of fear and awe, a lingering impression that the figure was neither alive nor dead, but something in between. Other employees have reported seeing fleeting shadows in peripheral vision, shapes that seem human but distort and vanish when looked at directly. Some claim to have felt the brush of a cold hand on their shoulder while working alone late at night. During moments of complete silence, the faint sound of breathing has been reported in rooms that are otherwise empty. Visitors sometimes describe an overwhelming sense of being watched, a presence that follows them through hallways and up stairwells, vanishing only when they leave the observatory. The phenomenon is not confined to indoor spaces. On the surrounding trails and at the observatory's parking areas, hikers and staff have reported strange lights in the forest at night, moving among the trees in patterns that do not resemble animals. Occasionally, a glowing figure is glimpsed walking along the ridgeline, visible only for a moment before fading into the darkness. The locals have begun to weave these sightings into the mountain's lore, suggesting that Mount Lemmon itself may be a nexus for unexplained activity, a place where the boundaries between the earthly and the spectral blur. Some believe that the haunting is connected to the observatory's history and the people who worked there. Over decades, countless astronomers, technicians, and volunteers have spent long nights under the mountain sky, often isolated and immersed in quiet observation. There are stories that those who spent significant time alone in the observatory occasionally vanished from records, leaving behind only personal effects and instruments still in use. While no one has been officially declared missing in recent years, the tales feed a growing belief that the observatory attracts a lingering energy tied to human presence and obsession with the stars. Experiences at Mount Lemmon are often subtle but cumulative, creating a persistent feeling that the observatory is alive in ways unrelated to its technology. Objects shift positions without explanation. Chairs moved, notebooks opened to pages that were previously blank, and telescopes slightly angled toward areas of the sky no one was observing. Cameras and recording devices occasionally capture unexplained light anomalies, or distorted figures glimpsed in corners of footage that vanish on playback. Some astronomers have described seeing a translucent figure leaning over a telescope, as though observing the same celestial bodies they were focused on. The mountain's isolation amplifies the effects. During storms, wind howls through the surrounding forest, carrying strange echoes that mingle with the sounds of distant thunderstorms. Shadows cast by lightning appear to move independently, and the flickering illumination creates the illusion of figures gliding along the ridge. Even experienced staff, accustomed to high-altitude work and extreme weather, report sensations of unease, as if the observatory and the mountain itself are aware of every movement and intent. Visitors and staff who have encountered the phenomena describe an emotional impact that lingers long after leaving Mount Lemmon. Feelings of anxiety, awe, and disorientation are common, as though they have brushed against a realm that is only partially perceivable. Some have tried to communicate with the apparition, calling out to it or attempting to follow fleeting shadows, but the responses are always subtle. A change in temperature, a sudden gust of wind, or an imperceptible shift in the equipment. The sense is that the mountain and the observatory are guardians of an unseen presence, one that can be observed but never fully comprehended. Mount Lemmon, with its pine-clad slopes and panoramic views of Tucson, continues to draw astronomers, hikers, and paranormal enthusiasts alike. Its reputation as the haunted observatory only adds to its mystique, blending the beauty of the natural landscape with an enduring sense of mystery. Those who work and explore here are reminded that the mountain is more than a location. It is a threshold, a place where human curiosity and spectral presence intersect, where the night sky offers both wonder and a brush with the inexplicable. The road to Mount Evans, Colorado, is one of the highest paved highways in North America, a breathtaking yet treacherous path twisting through jagged cliffs and dizzying drops. On clear days, the summit seems like a gateway to the heavens, but when fog settles over the mountain, when the wind howls through the hairpin turns, a different story unfolds, one whispered by locals and feared by late-night travelers. They call him the Phantom Biker of Mount Evans. It begins the same way every time. A lone motorist or a small group drives the road after dark, the engine humming steadily as they navigate the sharp turns and steep ascents. Then, in the rearview mirror, a single headlight appears, a bright, piercing beam cutting through the mist. It grows closer, too quickly for comfort, as if the rider behind them is pushing the limits of speed and gravity. But just as the light draws near enough to illuminate the back of their vehicle, it suddenly disappears. No sound, no wreck, no trace. Only the faint smell of gasoline carried by the wind, and a feeling that something unseen is still following. According to local legend, the rider was a young man from Idaho Springs in the late 1970s, obsessed with motorcycles and danger in equal measure. He was known for racing up the Mount Evans scenic byway after midnight, boasting that he'd one day reach the summit before dawn. His friends tried to warn him. The curves were too sharp, the guardrails too few, and the fog too unpredictable. But he laughed it off, saying the mountain would have to catch him first. One fateful night, he made the attempt. Witnesses later claimed they heard the echo of his engine climbing higher and higher, until it was replaced by a single drawn-out scream and the metallic crash of something breaking apart on the rocks below. His body was never recovered, only pieces of his bike scattered hundreds of feet down a ravine. Since then, strange encounters have been reported with unnerving consistency. Park rangers, long-haul drivers, and tourists alike have told eerily similar stories. On foggy nights, when visibility drops to mere feet, a single motorcycle light appears behind them. It moves fast, weaving through the curves, as though guided by memory, rather than sight. Some claim to hear the faint growl of an engine echoing off the cliffs, though their own vehicle radios pick up only static when it passes. Others say the light reflects in the mist like an eye, blinking once before vanishing entirely. One ranger described his own experience while patrolling the road near Summit Lake. It was past midnight, and a storm was rolling in. He pulled over to check a section of the guardrail damaged earlier in the season when he noticed a faint light winding up from the lower road. At first, he assumed it was a late traveler, but the light grew unnaturally bright, cutting through the fog like a laser. Then, just as it reached the final curve below him, it vanished. Moments later, he heard the sound of tires screeching, followed by a hollow metallic clang, as if something unseen had just hit the guardrail he'd been inspecting. When he leaned over the edge with his flashlight, the slope below was empty. No debris, no engine noise, no tire marks on the asphalt. Locals have come to believe the phantom biker is trapped in a loop, forever reliving the final moments of his reckless ride. They say his spirit still races the mountain roads, caught between thrill and tragedy, chasing a summit he'll never reach. Some even claim that if you flash your headlights 3 times while driving up the mountain after dark, you can summon him, a bright beam appearing out of nowhere in response, closing the distance until you're forced to pull over in fear. And when you stop, the air grows heavy, the fog thickens, and for just a second, you might hear the low rumble of a motorcycle engine passing inches from your car door before fading into silence. Those who've seen him up close describe the apparition in chilling detail. A biker, clad in black leather, his helmet shattered down the middle, revealing a glimpse of pale, featureless skin beneath. His motorcycle gleams like chrome under moonlight, though no sound accompanies its movement. Sometimes he appears only as a headlight, a floating sphere of brilliance racing through the darkness. Other times, witnesses claim to see the full figure speed past them and vanish around a curve that leads nowhere. The mountain itself seems to hold his memory. Some hikers near the summit have reported hearing a distant engine roaring below. Despite the road being closed to vehicles for the season, campers along the lower slopes describe waking to the sound of skidding tires and the crash of metal, followed by silence. Even in daylight, faint tire marks sometimes appear on sections of the road where no vehicles have passed in weeks, as though the ghost of his bike continues to trace the path that led to his doom. Skeptics have tried to explain the phenomenon as tricks of light or reflections from passing cars, but the sheer number of accounts defies easy dismissal. Some theorize that dense fog and sharp elevation changes cause optical illusions, bending headlights from miles away into phantom beams. Others believe the mountain itself holds residual energy from the countless lives lost on its treacherous slopes, with the biker's spirit being one of the strongest among them. For the people who live near Mount Evans, the phantom biker has become more than a ghost story. He's a warning, a symbol of the mountain's power and the consequences of challenging it. Locals tell newcomers to drive carefully, especially after sunset, The road may look empty, but you're never truly alone up there. If you see a headlight behind you, where none should be, resist the urge to look back. Don't slow down, don't stop. Just keep driving until the light fades. Mount Mitchell, the highest peak east of the Mississippi, towers over North Carolina's Black Mountains like a silent sentinel. Its slopes are cloaked in thick fog, the air damp and heavy with the scent of pine and rain. The summit, often hidden in clouds, carries a haunting stillness, as if the mountain itself is holding its breath. Locals will tell you that it's not just the weather that watches travelers here. There's something else, someone who still patrols the trails, long after his duty should have ended. They call him the Ranger who never left. The legend dates back to the 1930s, when Mount Mitchell was first being developed as a state park. Rangers were few, the trails rugged and dangerous. One ranger in particular, Thomas Greer, was known for his devotion to the mountain. He was a quiet man, often seen walking the paths with his lantern at dusk, making sure no hikers were stranded before nightfall. He lived in a small cabin near the old observation tower, rarely coming down except to report to the ranger station. Locals admired his dedication, but said he seemed more comfortable among the trees than with people. One stormy night in late autumn, Ranger Greer set out to check on a group of campers reported missing near the lower trail. Heavy fog had rolled in, and freezing rain coated the ground in ice. Hours passed, then a full day, but Greer never returned. A search party found his lantern smashed on a rock and his hat hanging from a low branch, but no sign of the man himself. Some said he slipped into one of the deep ravines. Others whispered that the mountain had claimed him for its own. His body was never recovered. Not long after his disappearance, hikers began reporting strange encounters. They described meeting a man dressed in an old ranger uniform, the kind no longer used since the park modernized. He always appeared calm, polite, and soft-spoken, often warning travelers about incoming storms or suggesting safer paths back down the trail. Many said he even pointed them toward shelter, his lantern glowing warmly through the mist. But when they later reached a ranger station to thank him, they'd be told no such ranger was on duty that day, and certainly not one matching that description. One account came from a couple hiking the mountain in the 1950s. They recalled being caught in sudden fog so thick they could barely see their own hands. As they debated turning back, a voice called out from ahead, steady and reassuring. A tall man stepped into view, his uniform faded but neat, his lantern glowing a soft yellow. "You shouldn't be up here right now," he said. "There's a storm coming from the west. Take the ridge path and you'll make it down safe." They followed his directions. And minutes later, lightning began flashing across the summit. When they reached the base, they mentioned the helpful ranger to a staff member, only to be told the last ranger to die on patrol up there was Thomas Greer, nearly 20 years earlier. Another story came from a group of college students in the 1970s who camped near the summit one October night. As temperatures dropped, they heard footsteps crunching in the frost outside their tent. Thinking it was a park ranger checking permits, they stepped out and found a man in a vintage uniform standing by the line. He smiled faintly, lifted his lantern, and said, "You'd better pack up soon. The weather's turning ugly." They nodded, and he walked into the fog. Within minutes, snow began to fall. When they reported the encounter later that week, the ranger they spoke to paled. He knew that uniform. It hadn't been used in decades. Even modern hikers continued to share similar tales. Trail cameras occasionally capture strange lights moving through areas long after the park closes. One photo taken near the old observation tower shows what appears to be a man standing at the edge of the overlook, his features obscured, a faint glow surrounding his hand. When the photo was examined, no one could explain the source of the light. Some park rangers openly admit they felt a presence on the mountain, a feeling of being watched, not maliciously, but with concern. One veteran ranger told a local reporter, "Sometimes, when fog rolls in fast, I swear I hear boots on gravel behind me. But when I turn, no one's there. It's like someone's still doing their rounds." Hikers described the same atmosphere, a sudden drop in temperature, the faint scent of smoke or oil from an old lantern, and the sensation of being gently guided along the correct path. A few have even heard the soft jingle of keys or the creak of a leather belt somewhere just out of sight. In every account, the figure never harms anyone. He warns, he helps, and then he's gone. Skeptics argue that it's simply imagination, tricks of light, or fatigue in the high altitude, but those who've seen him swear otherwise. The details are too specific, too consistent. His appearance doesn't match any known staff, and the sense of calm he brings, they say, feels too real to be fear or coincidence. Locals believe Thomas Greer never truly left Mount Mitchell. Perhaps he lost his way that night, or perhaps the mountain took pity on his devotion. Whatever the reason, his spirit seems bound to his post, eternally watching over hikers who tread too far into danger. Unlike most ghosts, his presence is protective rather than vengeful. Some even call him the guardian of the peak. There are stories of hikers who ignored his warnings and nearly paid for it. One man claimed he saw the ranger appear beside him on a steep, icy trail. The ranger told him to turn back immediately, but he pressed on. Minutes later, a rock slide cut off the path behind him. Stranded for hours, he was eventually rescued, but he said he never forgot the ranger's face or the quiet authority in his voice. Mount Baker rises from Washington's northern wilderness like a sleeping giant, its jagged slopes blanketed in thick, eternal snow. On clear mornings, its glaciers gleam like sheets of glass under the sun, beautiful but deceptive. Beneath that icy surface, countless lives have been claimed. The mountain is treacherous, shifting crevasses, unpredictable storms, and winds that howl with a sound almost human. But one story in particular haunts those who dare climb it: the mystery of the missing climbers of 1975. That summer, a group of 8 experienced mountaineers set out to conquer Mount Baker's north face, one of its most difficult and unforgiving routes. They were well prepared, carrying ropes, radios, and food enough for a week. The weather forecast promised mild conditions, and spirits were high as they made their ascent. Other climbers who saw them that morning recalled laughter echoing through the valley as they disappeared into the white expanse, confident, fearless, and unaware that they were walking straight into a legend. 2 days later, a sudden snowstorm struck without warning. Winds tore through the upper ridges, temperatures dropped below freezing, and visibility vanished. When the storm finally passed, the group was gone. Search teams combed the slopes for days, finding only strange, unsettling clues. Their camp was discovered halfway up the glacier, tents intact, sleeping bags neatly laid out, and food still warm on a small stove, as if they had stepped away for only a moment. There were no signs of panic, no struggle, no footprints leading away in any direction. It was as though the climbers had simply vanished into the mountain itself. Rescuers scoured the surrounding ice fields, probing crevasses and scanning snowdrifts. Nothing, not a single trace of clothing, rope, or human remains. Helicopters circled for days, but the mountain remained silent, concealing whatever truth it held beneath its frozen skin. After weeks of fruitless searching, the operation was called off. The families of the missing received no closure, only a report that read, "Presumed lost due to avalanche or exposure." But even that explanation didn't sit right with those who had been there. The camp's untouched state defied logic. No avalanche could have left it so pristine, and if the climbers had fled, where were their tracks? Rangers noted that even after the storm, the snow was soft enough to preserve footprints. There were none, just smooth, unbroken whiteness stretching into the fog. Months later, when the snow melted slightly at lower elevations, strange sounds began to be reported by hikers. Late at night, when the mountain grew quiet, people claimed to hear the rhythmic sound of metal striking stone, steady, deliberate, like ice axes chipping away in the dark. The first few witnesses dismissed it as rocks shifting under the glacier, but more followed: climbers, rangers, even tourists camping miles from the summit, all describing the same eerie pattern. A few claimed the sound came closer as they listened, echoing faintly in the wind before fading away completely. Some said it was just the mountain groaning under its weight. Others whispered that the missing climbers were still there, forever trapped beneath the ice. their spirits reliving their final moments, trying to dig their way out. Over the years, the legend grew. Those who attempted the same route often reported strange occurrences. Radios picking up static that formed into faint voices. Compass needles spinning wildly near the old campsite. Cameras malfunctioning when aimed toward the glacier. One experienced mountaineer recounted how, during a night ascent in 1988, he awoke to the sound of footsteps circling his tent. He called out, thinking his partner had returned from scouting, but when he looked outside, the snow was undisturbed and the air was unnaturally still. Another climber in the early 2000s told a chilling story. He had set up camp close to where the 1975 group had vanished. Around midnight, he heard what sounded like faint laughter carried by the wind, distant at first, then closer, overlapping voices, rising and falling as if from several people. The sound seemed to drift across the snow, surrounding his tent. He shined his flashlight outside, but saw only fog and shadows. When he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of figures moving through the blizzard, faceless, their outlines glowing faintly white. When he woke at dawn, a trail of faint depressions marked the snow just outside his camp, leading toward the glacier and stopping abruptly. There have been attempts to locate the lost climbers using modern technology. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have scanned parts of Mount Baker's glacier field, revealing deep cavities, but shifting ice makes retrieval impossible. The mountain gives up nothing. Some experts suggest that climbers may have fallen into a crevasse that later sealed shut, entombing them forever. But even that theory fails to explain why their camp remained so undisturbed, or how 8 people could disappear in an instant without leaving so much as a trail of movement. Among the local communities around Mount Baker, stories of the Frozen 8 are passed down as both warning and reverence. The mountain, they say, is alive. It takes what it wants and keeps it. On still nights, when the wind is calm and the moon glows against the snow, old-timers claim you can see flickers of light moving across the glacier, like lanterns swinging slowly in the distance. Some believe it's the spirits of the lost climbers, still searching for a way home. Others think it's the mountain showing a glimpse of what it holds deep within. Even park rangers tread carefully near the site. A few admit they heard the same metallic rhythm, the ghostly clang of an ice axe hitting stone, echoing through the canyons after dusk. They say it sounds almost methodical, like a team working in sync. Yet no expedition has ever been found, no climbers alive or dead. Every year, new hikers venture up Mount Baker unaware of the story, and some return with strange tales, voices carried by the wind, flickers of movement in the fog, or the sense of being watched from somewhere above. The air grows colder there, sharper, as if the mountain itself remembers. Mount Baker remains one of the most breathtaking but unforgiving peaks in America, a place where beauty and danger coexist in perfect silence. And somewhere beneath its glittering glaciers, the mountain holds its secret. Perhaps the climbers are still there, frozen in time, their last breaths captured in ice. Or perhaps they became part of the mountain itself, their souls mingling with the wind, whispering warnings to those who dare follow in their footsteps. Mount Timpanogos rises like a sleeping figure against the Utah sky, its ridges and valleys forming what many say looks like the shape of a woman lying on her back. To the local tribes, this resemblance is not a coincidence, but the result of an ancient tragedy. One so powerful that the mountain itself became her tomb. They call her the Maiden of Timpanogos, and her heart, they say, still beats beneath the glacier that bears her name. Long before settlers came to the valley, the people of the Ute tribe told stories of a beautiful maiden named Ukonogos, whose laughter was said to bring warmth to even the coldest winters. She was kind, wise, and deeply devoted to her people. But war came, a fierce conflict between her tribe and a rival clan from the north. In the chaos of battle, Ukonogos met a young warrior named Red Eagle, a brave fighter from the enemy side. Fate twisted cruelly that day. When their eyes met across the smoke-filled valley, neither could raise a weapon. What began as enmity turned to forbidden love. Under the cover of night, they met by the river that flowed from the mountain's base. For moons, they kept their secret, meeting in silence, dreaming of peace between their people. But the war only grew bloodier. One evening, Red Eagle failed to arrive. Days passed. Then a messenger brought word. He had fallen in battle. Heartbroken, Yukonogos climbed the mountain they both had watched together so many times. The winds grew colder as she ascended, carrying whispers through the pines like voices urging her to stop. But she didn't. She reached the summit and looked across the valley, her tears freezing as they fell. Legend says she knelt and prayed for her spirit to join Red Eagle's, and with her final breath, she leaped from the peak into the clouds below. The next morning, her people found that a new glacier had formed on the mountainside, shimmering like glass under the sun. Its outline, they said, mirrored the shape of the maiden herself, her face, her body, her heart forever encased in ice. From that day forward, the mountain became known as Timpanogos, the Rock of the Woman. For generations, the story remained just that, a tale told by elders around campfires. But those who climb Mount Timpanogos today whisper that the legend is more than myth. Strange things happen on that mountain, especially near the glacier that bears her heart. Hikers who camp near the summit often wake in the middle of the night to the sound of soft weeping carried on the wind. At first, they assume it's just a groaning of ice shifting under pressure, until the cries take on a distinctly human tone, echoing through the valleys like sorrow itself. Some claim they've seen a faint figure wandering near their tents, a woman dressed in flowing white, her hair trailing like mist. She never speaks, only stands in silence, gazing out toward the valley as if still waiting for someone who never returned. One climber, a park ranger named Daniel, who had spent years exploring the region, shared an encounter he couldn't explain. He and a group of hikers camped near Emerald Lake, just below the glacier. Around midnight, the temperature dropped sharply, and Daniel awoke to a tapping sound on the fabric of his tent. When he reached for his flashlight, the tapping stopped, but when he shone the light, he froze. On the outside of his tent were faint marks, the shape of slender hands pressed against the fabric, each print rimmed with frost. He stepped outside, but the night was utterly still. Only the moon glowed above, and the mountain loomed in silence. By morning, the prints had melted into tiny rivulets of water running down the side of his tent. Others have described dreams that feel far too real. One woman who hiked alone to the summit swore she dreamed of kneeling beside a crying figure dressed in deerskin, her tears turning to ice as they hit the ground. When the woman awoke, the front of her sleeping bag was wet, as if someone had been crying over her in the night. Even in daylight, Mount Timpanogos holds an eerie calm. Locals say that if you listen closely while standing near the glacier, you can sometimes hear the faint sound of a heartbeat pulsing through the ice, slow, steady, and sorrowful. Scientists claim it's just water flowing beneath the surface. But those who've heard it insist it feels different, like the mountain itself is alive, mourning endlessly for the love it lost. In winter, the glacier gleams with an almost unnatural brightness. Some climbers have reported seeing flashes of color within the ice, reds and pinks that look eerily like the hue of living flesh. One photograph taken years ago captured what appeared to be the outline of a woman's face embedded deep within the glacier wall, eyes closed as though in sleep. Experts dismissed it as a trick of light and shadow, but those familiar with the legend weren't so sure. Despite the chilling tales, hikers continued to ascend Mount Timpanogos, drawn not only by its beauty, but by the story that clings to its slopes like mist. Each year, a few brave souls camp near the summit, testing the old legend. Some return unchanged. Others come back with haunted eyes, speaking of dreams they can't explain, dreams of standing on the edge of a cliff, feeling the cold wind against their face, and hearing a woman's voice whisper, "Do you still wait for me?" Even today, locals avoid speaking her name aloud after dark, fearing it might summon her restless spirit. They say the Maiden of Timpanogos still roams the mountain at night, forever searching for her lost love. Her tears feed the glacier, her heart beats in the stone, and her sorrow lingers in every gust of wind that sweeps down the slopes. Mount Chakarua rises sharply from the forests of New Hampshire, its granite peak cutting into the sky like a blade. It's a place of breathtaking beauty. Clear lakes shimmer at its base, and from its summit you can see the rolling white mountains stretch endlessly into the horizon. But beneath that beauty lies a tale of betrayal, vengeance, and a curse said to echo through every storm that sweeps across the land. Locals call it the curse of the chief, and they say it has never lifted. Long before the settlers came, this land belonged to the Abenaki. Among them was a respected chief named Shakarua, a man known for his wisdom, courage, and deep connection to the natural world. The mountain was sacred to him, a place where he prayed, hunted, and taught his people the old ways. When European settlers began moving into the region, Shakarua sought peace. He welcomed them cautiously, believing coexistence might be possible. One settler, a farmer named Cornelius Campbell, became his friend. The two men traded goods, and Shakarua even trusted Campbell enough to leave his young son in the family care while he traveled to distant tribes. But trust can be fragile. One summer, tragedy struck. Shakarua's son fell ill after drinking milk from Campbell's livestock. The boy died within days. Devastated and enraged, the chief believed the settlers had poisoned his child, whether by accident or intent. He didn't care. Consumed by grief, he turned against those he once called allies. He attacked Campbell's homestead, killing his family and burning the fields before vanishing into the wilderness. Campbell, driven by rage and heartbreak, gathered a group of settlers and pursued Shakarua into the mountains. They followed his tracks through the forest until they reached a summit, a steep windswept cliff overlooking the valley. There, they cornered him. With nowhere left to run, the old chief stood at the edge, the wind whipping through his hair. The settlers demanded he surrender, but Shakarua only lifted his arms toward the sky. His voice rang out across the peaks, not in fear, but in fury. He cursed them all. May the Great Spirit curse you when you need the strength of your crops and the love of your children, he shouted. The evil you have done shall live after you. The land shall be barren, your cattle shall die, your homes shall burn, and the wind shall carry my voice until justice is done. Then, before they could reach him, he leaped from the cliff and fell to his death below. From that moment, the land was never the same. Within weeks, strange misfortunes began to spread through the valley. Livestock grew sick and died. Crops withered despite the rain. One settler's barn caught fire under a clear sky, the flames burning an unnatural blue. Storms would appear without warning, violent and unrelenting, tearing through the farmlands as if guided by rage itself. The settlers whispered that Shakarua's spirit had not died, that it roamed the mountain, watching, waiting, and calling down punishment from the heavens. Even now, centuries later, the curse seems to linger. Locals claim Mount Shakarua has its own weather storms form over its peak, even when the skies everywhere else are calm. Lightning strikes its summit more often than any other mountain in the region, and hikers have reported hearing thunder roll when there are no clouds at all. To the people who live nearby, that thunder isn't just sound. It's the voice of Chief Shakarua, demanding justice for what was done to him and his son. Many hikers and campers have their own chilling stories. Some say they've heard chanting from the cliffs when the fog rolls in, a rhythmic murmur that rises and falls like a prayer. Others report seeing a shadowy figure standing on the ledge, arms raised toward the sky, only for it to vanish the moment lightning flashes. One man described hearing what sounded like a flute playing deep within the forest, even though he was miles from any trail. When he turned to leave, a gust of wind nearly pushed him off balance, and he swore he heard a voice whisper his name. There are also stories of people who ignored the local warnings, hikers who mocked the legend or shouted curses into the air, only to find themselves lost on the descent despite clear trails. Compasses stop working near certain ridges, and phones die for no reason. One group of campers woke in the middle of the night to find strange symbols drawn in the dirt around their tents, shapes resembling feathers and eyes. Though they insisted no one had left the campsite, even experienced rangers approached Shakarua with respect. They tell newcomers that the mountain has moods. Some days, it's peaceful, the wind soft and warm. Other days, it seems alive, humming with a strange energy that makes the skin prickle. You can feel him watching, one ranger said quietly. He doesn't hate everyone. He just doesn't forget. In the nearby towns, when storms blow and unexpectedly, residents often look toward the mountain and murmur, "The chief is speaking again." There are tales of lightning striking the same tree near the base of the mountain every year on the same day, the anniversary of Shakarua's death. Some believe the spirit still guards that place, marking his presence so the world remembers. Over the centuries, attempts to dismiss the curse as mere superstition have done little to stop the stories. Scientists can explain the weather patterns, the magnetic interference, the echoes that sound like voices, but for those who live in the shadow of Mount Shakarua, explanations don't change what they've seen or heard. The mountain feels alive. Its silence is never empty. Every now and then, a traveler will climb to the summit at sunset. The view is breathtaking, the world spread out in shades of gold and shadow. But as the wind rises, that beauty turns uneasy. It's easy to imagine the chief standing there centuries ago, his arms raised, his curse carried on the air. And when thunder rumbles far away, rolling softly through the valley, even the bravest climbers feel their hearts tighten. Because in that sound, low and mournful, they swear they can still hear a voice ancient, angry, and eternal whispering through the storm. The curse of Chief Chakarua was never about revenge alone. It was a warning, a reminder that betrayal leaves scars that time cannot heal. The settlers are long gone, their farms reclaimed by the forest, but the mountain remains unchanged and unyielding. And when the clouds gather and the first lightning splits the sky above the peak, those who know the story bow their heads in silence, because they understand what the thunder means. Mount Marcy, the highest peak in New York State, rises 5,344 feet above the Adirondack wilderness, its slopes cloaked in dense forests and jagged rock outcroppings. For centuries, it has drawn explorers, hikers, and adventurers seeking the panoramic views from its summit. Yet beneath its beauty lies a darkness, a legend that has haunted the mountain since the late 19th century. It is the story of the lost explorer. In the summer of 1870, a young man named Jonathan Hayes set out from the small village of Keene Valley with one goal: to conquer Mount Marcy. Hayes was an experienced outdoorsman, known for his meticulous preparations and knowledge of the Adirondacks. He carried a leather pack containing a compass, journal, and provisions meant to last several days. Villagers admired his determination, though they warned him about the treacherous weather patterns and the dense forests that could swallow a man whole. Hayes set off with a confident stride, disappearing into the thick pines at the base of the mountain. Days passed, and he did not return. Concerned, local men formed a search party, scouring trails, streams, and ridges for any sign of the young explorer. They found scraps of his supplies, footprints leading deeper into the wilderness, and finally, a compass, its needle spinning wildly, pointing nowhere. Several weeks later, Hayes' body was discovered near a hidden glade, frozen upright against a tree. His journal lay open in the snow, entries abruptly ending with a note that read, "The mountain moves. It does not want me here." Villagers were unsettled. Hayes had clearly tried to navigate carefully, yet something on the mountain had led him astray. The compass, now a haunting symbol of the mountain's defiance, seemed to mock the idea that a man could master the wilderness. Since that day, hikers and campers have reported strange occurrences on Mount Marcy. On foggy mornings, some claim to see a man wandering aimlessly through the trees, dressed in an old coat and carrying a tattered pack. At first, they assume it is another hiker, but when approached, he disappears into the mist, leaving behind only a single boot print in the dirt or snow. The print is usually half-formed, as if the ground itself resists holding his weight. Campers who stay overnight near the summit have heard eerie sounds in the forest, the crunch of footsteps just beyond their tents, or the faint scratching of a stick against a tree. Others report glimpses of a pale face peering from behind birch trunks, watching silently before vanishing. These sightings are often accompanied by an inexplicable chill in the air, even in summer. Some hikers have felt a sudden disorientation, a dizziness that fades only after retreating from the area. The legend of Hayes has grown over the decades, merging with tales of the Adirondack wilderness itself. Some locals believe the mountain is alive, a sentient force that protects its secrets. They say it lures those who are too confident, too curious, into paths that seem familiar but are actually loops leading them deeper into isolation. The spinning compass becomes a symbol, not of failure, but of the mountain's own will. In the early 20th century, a forest ranger named Thomas Green documented multiple encounters with the lost explorer's spirit. He wrote in his journal that while patrolling a remote trail near the summit, he saw a man in a long, weathered coat moving through the trees. Green approached cautiously, calling out, but the figure turned as if acknowledging him, and then simply vanished. Green marked a single boot print in the snow, identical to the descriptions passed down from local hikers. The journal entry concludes, "Mount Marcy does not release its dead. It walks among us, unseen and unnoticed, guiding or warning." Perhaps both. Modern hikers equipped with GPS devices and satellite phones have sometimes reported their equipment failing inexplicably near the summit. Compasses spin without direction, electronic devices shut down, and radio signals cut out. These anomalies only reinforce the legend that the mountain retains some old magic. A force older than human navigation, older than maps. Some claim that Hayes' spirit continues to wander, trapped between worlds, drawn by the mountain's pull and compelled to roam endlessly. Even today, seasoned hikers avoid certain trails at twilight, particularly during fog or early snowfall. They speak in hushed tones about the man in the coat, leaving small offerings of food or stones at the base of trees, perhaps as a gesture of respect or appeasement. Many who have encountered him describe the feeling of being observed, a weight pressing against their minds, as if the lost explorer's spirit recognizes them as intruders or fellow wanderers. Mount Ashland rises quietly in southern Oregon, its slopes cloaked in thick, dark forests that seem to hum with life. By day, it's a place of natural beauty, trails lined with towering pines, wildflowers blanketing clearings, and streams that glisten in the sunlight. But when the sun dips below the horizon, the mountain changes. Locals and campers speak in whispers about the woods that watch, a place where something unseen observes every movement, every breath, every careless sound. Stories have circulated for decades. Hikers describe the sensation immediately upon entering the dense sections of forest. A subtle awareness, a feeling that they are being followed, though no footprints or animal signs appear behind them. Even in the middle of an open meadow, with nothing but sky overhead, the sensation persists. It is not a presence that moves toward you. They say it simply exists, patiently, invisibly, waiting. Campers are often the first to notice the strange occurrences. They arrive with tents and backpacks, confident in their ability to handle the wilderness. But as darkness deepens, the forest seems to grow heavier. A breeze carries no scent, yet it chills the skin. A shadow flits across the edge of the tent, but when the camper unzips it to look, there is nothing. Some mornings, those who stay overnight awake to find something even more unsettling. Small handprints pressed into the outer fabric of their tents. The impressions are child-sized, almost delicate, yet there are no other signs of life. No footprints in the dirt, no broken branches, no fur or feathers to explain them. The prints vanish quickly as the sun warms the tent, melting into the fibers as if they were never there. Campers often pack up and leave immediately after finding them, shaken and silent, sharing the story only with close friends. Locals insist these are not ghosts. They call them watchers, entities that observe without interfering, at least, not directly. Some believe the watchers are remnants of an ancient forest consciousness, creatures that predate humans, born from the trees themselves. Others think they might be spirits of those who vanished in the woods over the decades, lingering not to harm, but to guard, to study, to ensure the forest remains unspoiled. Hikers report other, subtler signs. A branch snaps, though no animal is in sight. A stone moves slightly when no one has touched it. Footsteps echo across empty trails, perfectly timed to match the hiker's own, though always a step behind. A camera left unattended may capture fleeting shadows in the corners of a frame, shapes that vanish when reviewed, leaving only a blurred smear that cannot be explained. A longtime ranger recounted an encounter that chilled even the most skeptical. He had spent the night camping alone near the summit, listening to the soft murmur of the wind through pines. At some point, he noticed a faint silhouette standing at the tree line. He called out, thinking it might be a late hiker, but the figure did not respond. When he approached, the area was completely empty, yet the sense of being watched did not fade. That feeling lingered with him for days, a pressure in his chest, a shadow in his mind, as if the forest itself had marked him. Even the experienced hikers who frequent Mount Ashland respect the stories. They speak in quiet tones about the mountain's eyes, its patience, its stillness. They do not venture deep into the densest parts after dusk. Some leave small offerings, stones stacked into tiny cairns, food left at the edge of the forest, gestures of acknowledgement, tokens meant to appease or honor the watchers. Many swear these small acts prevent more unsettling events, though no one can be sure. The forest, it seems, has rules that humans cannot fully understand. The watchers do not chase or attack, yet their presence is undeniable. Even in full daylight, visitors sometimes catch glimpses of movement in their peripheral vision, flashes of dark forms among the trees that vanish when they turn their heads. The feeling of being observed is constant, a weight pressing lightly but insistently on the mind, a quiet reminder that the forest is not empty. Some theories suggest the watchers are echoes of the past, spirits of hunters or travelers who disappeared in Mount Ashland's dense woods, bound to the place by unfinished business or some ancient oath. Others think the watchers are more elemental, a collective consciousness born from centuries of growth, decay, and renewal, safeguarding the mountain with patient vigilance. Whatever the truth, there is one consistent fact: those who spend the night here often leave with stories, a heightened awareness, and an unease that lingers long after they descend the trails. Mount Ashland may appear serene and inviting, but the woods hold secrets that cannot be ignored. Campers and hikers leave tokens, respect the trails, and heed the warnings of locals. The watchers are not cruel, but they are relentless, observant, and eternal. They are the silent witnesses to every human misstep, every careless sound, every footprint left behind. And for anyone who spends a night within their gaze, the forest leaves its mark, subtle and invisible, yet undeniable. Mount Massive rises quietly in Colorado's Sawatch Range, its jagged peaks and snow-covered ridges commanding respect from anyone who ventures into its wilderness. At 14,428 feet, it is the state's second highest mountain, just slightly lower than nearby Mount Elbert. Yet according to local legend, that tiny difference in height carries a weight far beyond mere numbers. Mount Massive, some say, does not take well to being second. Its pride is alive, and those who disrespect it risk more than misfortune. They risk disappearing. The story dates back to the early settlers and miners who first explored the Sawatch Range. Villagers began noticing a pattern. Whenever climbers praised Mount Elbert for its towering height, storms would suddenly gather over Massive, even when the sky over the rest of the valley was perfectly clear. Lightning would crack the ridges, wind would roar through the valleys, and a strange low hum, like the mountain itself, breathing, could be heard echoing off the rocks. Superstitious locals soon concluded that the mountains were not just silent peaks. They had spirits, and these spirits were jealous. Spiritualists and mountain elders reinforced this belief. They claimed that Mount Massive had a guardian spirit, a force as old as the rocks themselves, which resented Mount Elbert's fame. This spirit, they warned, did not tolerate mockery or disrespect. Travelers were told to offer quiet words to both peaks before climbing, to show reverence for the mountain's power and pride. Few heeded the advice, and those who did not sometimes vanished, leaving only strange traces behind. One of the most chilling modern accounts occurred in 2009. A climber named Adam Reynolds, confident in his skill and dismissive of the old stories, set out to ascend Mount Massive. Friends recall him joking about climbing the lesser mountain, mocking its height while praising Elbert in texts and social media posts. He carried a camera, a backpack, and a sense of invincibility, convinced the legends were nothing more than local folklore. The morning was bright and clear, the sun shining over the valleys, with no hint of weather change. By midday, Adam reached the upper slopes, taking photographs of the panoramic views. Then, inexplicably, the clouds began to gather around him, forming dense, swirling shapes that seemed almost deliberate in their movement. A wind arose, sudden and sharp, carrying a chill that belied the summer heat. When Adam did not return that evening, a search party was dispatched. They found his backpack and climbing gear neatly arranged near the ridge, his compass pointing in every direction at once. There were no footprints leading away from the equipment, no sign that he had left voluntarily. Days later, his camera was recovered from a rock ledge. The last image captured was unmistakable. Adam, standing near the edge of a cliff, clouds rolling behind him, and within them, a human-shaped shadow hovering impossibly close. The shadow seemed to mirror his posture, yet it was larger, darker, and somehow more commanding. Since that incident, hikers and locals have spoken of Mount Massive with renewed caution. Clear skies can turn threatening in minutes, and climbers often report hearing low murmurs or feeling sudden gusts that push them back, as if the mountain itself resents their presence. Those who have ventured near the summit describe fleeting shadows in the clouds, shapes that vanish when approached, yet return when attention is diverted. Cameras sometimes capture inexplicable streaks or dark forms, never fully explained by light, wind, or mist. Spiritualists insist that the mountain's guardian spirit is very real. It does not chase or attack, they say, but it asserts its authority in subtle ways. Shifting weather, sudden gusts, or that unnerving sense of being watched. Some believe it uses the clouds as a veil, its form taking shape only for a brief moment to warn or punish those who mock the mountain or favor Elbert too openly. Others claim it is a jealous sibling, competing eternally with Elbert, seeking acknowledgement from anyone who dares to climb. Locals advise climbers to speak respectfully of both peaks, leaving offerings or taking a quiet moment at the base before ascending. Some stack stones in small cairns, others leave simple notes of reverence. Few will admit that these gestures are for fear of supernatural reprisal, but the tradition persists. Hikers who ignore the warnings often return with stories of swirling fog, odd whispers in the wind, or shadows that seem alive, moving in ways that defy logic. Mount Massive continues to rise over the Sawatch Range, proud and silent, yet ever vigilant. It holds the memory of those who disappeared and the energy of its guardian spirit, a force both patient and powerful. The story of Adam Reynolds serves as a cautionary tale. To approach the mountain with arrogance is to risk being swallowed by its pride, leaving nothing behind but gear, spinning compasses, and photographs of shadows in the clouds. Mount Rainier rises majestically over the Washington landscape, its glaciers and snowfields gleaming in sunlight, a symbol of beauty, power, and danger. To hikers and climbers, it offers both breathtaking views and formidable challenges. But beneath its stunning exterior lies a story far darker than the usual tales of harsh weather and hidden crevasses. Locals, park rangers, and those who venture into its trails quietly speak of a phenomenon known as the twin shadow, a presence that mirrors your movements, yet is not your own. The legend is old, whispered first by early park rangers and later by mountaineers who spent long nights alone on the mountain. To shadows walk the trails, they say. One belongs to you, cast naturally by the sun or flashlight. The other is different, darker, heavier, and unnervingly sentient. It moves independently, often appearing ahead of you, lingering in corners of your vision, or appearing just beyond the reach of light. Hikers report that it does not mimic their exact movements. Instead, it seems to anticipate, almost to taunt. Accounts from visitors vary, but the pattern is consistent. One climber recounted hiking a narrow ridge at dusk, the last rays of the sun stretching long shadows over the rocky terrain. As he looked down, he noticed a shadow moving before him, bending, turning, even stumbling slightly. Before he had moved a single step, fear gripped him. An instinct told him to retreat, but curiosity forced him forward. Within minutes, a sudden gust of wind knocked him off balance, sending him scrambling back to the safety of the trail. That was the last time he ignored the warning. Rangers have corroborated these stories with their own observations. Patrols often report seeing shadows that cannot be accounted for, to figures walking in tandem with the trail, even when only one person is present. Cameras left unattended have caught fleeting glimpses of dark forms standing among trees or on ridges, forms that vanish when approached. In some instances, hikers returning from the same trail hours later reported their own shadows, seemingly shifted, appearing in photographs where they shouldn't have been. The twin shadow is not malevolent in the traditional sense. It does not strike or chase, yet it carries an undeniable threat. Locals insist that if the shadow looks back at you, it has already chosen you. The mountain is not forgiving to those who ignore it, those who fail to respect the forces it harbors. In countless accounts, the twin shadow appears just as hikers lose awareness, moving slightly ahead, waiting for the right moment to remind them of the mountain's dominion. Some speculate about its origin. Early Native American tribes believed Mount Rainier was a living entity, a powerful guardian of the land, whose gaze could pierce into the hearts of those who approached. To them, the shadow may have represented the mountain's spirit, an extension of its will, warning the unprepared or the reckless. Others think it is a lingering echo of the countless climbers who perished in storms, avalanche, and falls, a spectral presence born from tragedy, forever wandering the mountains' trails. Modern technology has failed to demystify it. GPS trackers and digital cameras often malfunction near the high ridges where the shadow appears. Compasses spin inexplicably, and radios cut out. Even experienced climbers who scoffed at the legend report a feeling of being watched, a pressure in the air that cannot be explained. The twin shadow seems to exist partially outside the normal laws of physics, a presence anchored to the mountain and to those who traverse it. The phenomenon is most commonly reported during solitary hikes. Groups tend to dismiss the sightings as tricks of the light, but those alone cannot shake the sense of a twin presence stalking them. It moves silently, almost imperceptibly, staying just beyond the range of perception until you sense it directly. Some hikers describe it as a whisper in the wind, a peripheral movement, or a chill that brushes across the back of the neck, subtle yet undeniable. Those who heed the warning often return unharmed but changed. They speak quietly of an awareness of forces beyond human understanding, of the need to respect the mountain and its secrets. They warn others to be vigilant, to watch not just their surroundings, but themselves. If you see your shadow move before you, they insist, do not approach, turn back. The mountain claims those who ignore its signs. Mount Rainier's twin shadow remains one of the mountain's most persistent mysteries. It is a reminder that beauty and danger often coexist, and that some forces on this earth are beyond human comprehension. To those who venture alone, the lesson is clear. The mountain is alive, aware, and patient. It watches, it waits, and when the shadow looks back at you, it is already too late. You've done it, brave listener. You've crossed frozen summits, walked through ancient legends, and faced the restless souls of America's haunted heights. But remember, mountains are more than just stone and snow. They are memory. They are the Earth's diary, filled with names we've forgotten and whispers we still hear. So next time you look up at a distant peak shining under the moonlight, listen carefully. You might just hear a call in the wind, soft, familiar, almost human.